She paused. The footsteps got louder, resonating across the walls, closer with each painful beat of her heart. She smelled his signature fragrance before he walked through the doorway on her right, a mug smile on his face. The mere sight of him sent a mix of fear, anger, and embarrassment through her. She dug her nails into her palm as he lazed around the room, like he wasn't being watched, like he hadn't drugged her and tied her up in a freaking abandoned building. She forced her eyes shut, drew strength from the thought of being free, and asked, "Why, Adrian?" Adrian picked at a chipped paint absent-mindedly. He barely looked her way, almost like he hadn't even heard her. "Adrian, why are you doing this to me?" She yelled. Her body trembled with the force of it, the veins in her neck prominent enough to burst. She shifted her feet. His silence wreaked havoc on her nerves. What was he thinking? What was his plan? If he wanted her dead, why hadn't he just killed her after drugging her? Why go through the hassle of tying her up? Was he playing some absurd mind game? She dug deeper into her palm, deep enough to draw blood. It was all she could do not to yell like a crazy person, or pull at the ropes, or basically do anything. "Adrian?" she called, pleading with her eyes for him to look her way. Adrian ticked off edge after edge of paint like it were some very exciting game. He turned to her. The unsettling smile still played on his lips as he arched a brow at her. "Yes?" he demanded. "Why am I here? I thought you were done with me." A deep, throaty laugh filled the empty room. His shoulders shook with each deep rumble. Julie shrunk back at the sound. It was chaotically positioned at the thin line between mad and absolutely crazy. "Done with you?" he whispered. "Done with you?" Julie jumped back in fright at the sudden change in volume. He took slow, bold steps towards the spot where she was tied up, something dark swirling in his eyes. "Oh, Julie." He shook his head. His head dipped as he crouched beside her. He was so close, his scent invaded Julie's very space. Julie grabbed onto the arm of the chair, the rope harsh against her sore wrists. "You see, that's one thing I found alluring about you. You and your optimism." He made a tsk sound with teeth and ran a hand through his already messy hair. "So damn annoying," he muttered. Julie fought back the tear that threatened to slip. She couldn't believe that was the man she almost swore her life to, the man she gave her heart, her trust, her everything. Now that same man had her tied to a chair, openly mocked her. "Why did you kidnap you, Adrian?" "Oh, no need to use such big words now, Julie. I'd like to call it an unexpected visit." He tipped her jaw upwards. Her eyes met his. She tried to read him. Like she thought she could, before she found out their entire relationship had been nothing but a lie. She turned her head to the side only to have it shoved back towards him. "As to your question," he trailed off, crouching in front of her. "If you want to blame anyone for your current situation, blame your boyfriend." He spat, tossed her jaw aside, and got to his feet. "You see, Kai likes to think he is unstoppable, untouchable, unanswerable to anyone but himself." He tossed over his shoulder as he strolled lazily around the room. The same unsettling smile stretched across his lips as he said, "That's where I come in. Sadly, I have to pull you down with me." He shrugged. Adrian took his time with each step, a bounce in his walk. "Kai cost me everything, literally made me homeless," he yelled. He forced a breath through his lips and added, "He needs to be taught a lesson, and I would gladly be his unpaid lesson teacher." Julie's brows wrinkled in confusion. "What makes you think I matter to him? He can barely stand my presence." Julie rushed. "Trust me, he would be more than happy to be rid of me. You would literally be making his day." Julie tried to sway him, begged him to see just how much she believed her own weird and free her. She didn't need to be involved in whatever was going on with both of them. Adrian gave that hair-raising laugh again. "Of course you matter to him. You're carrying his freaking child," he yelled in her face. Julie turned to the side, away from his flaring nostrils and crazed eyes. Nothing else would get his attention like capturing the mother of his unborn pup, his heir. He leaned away. Julie released a shaky breath. Her voice shook as she asked, "How D?" She swallowed hard. "Where did you hear that?" she asked. Her shock kept her still against the chair. Adrian shrugged, but didn't bother to respond. "It's yours." The words left her lips so hurriedly she was unsure she had actually said them. Adrian turned in her direction, arched a brow at her but didn't say anything. "I swear it is," I didn't want to tell you about it for obvious reasons. I was angry. I felt betrayed. She rushed. Her eyes pleaded for him to believe her. I didn't want you to take this one away, too. She whispered sincerely. Her voice broke as she thought back to how it had felt to discover the truth about the pills he always insisted she took for her health. Still, hard to believe when I made sure you couldn't while we were together. He snapped. I don't even understand it either. The doctor has me tested. I was confirmed infertile, but here I am, pregnant. She pointed to her stomach as if to emphasize the obvious. I know it, yours, Adri. Don't waste your breath, Julie. I'm sure of my sources. That child is his, and you know it. He scoffed, his tone icy cold. Julie's mouth dropped open. Hadn't he heard anything she had said? What sources, she asked, and I'd tell you that why. Kai dumped into his chair, exhausted. He cracked his fingers, packed up the files yet to be sorted, and placed them carefully in the desk drawer. He huffed, shrugging his shoulders to soothe his aching muscles. He got into his seat and tossed his briefcase behind without looking. A smile stretched across his face as the car hummed to life. He couldn't help but wonder what she'd been up to since she left the office. He considered calling her. His mood lifted just at the thought of seeing her, talking to her again. The past few weeks had been nothing but hell. They'd basically lived in the same house but hadn't said more than a word to each other. He couldn't help but think it had somehow been his fault. But all that was in the past. She'd kissed him back with as much hunger as he had. She missed him too. He stepped on the accelerator, his hand gripped and released the steering wheel, unable to contain his excitement. Maybe he could try and convince her to recreate the blind date. His shoulders shook at the thought. She'd probably try to slap him upside the head first before she rejected his proposal. He stepped on the gas, the recoil nothing compared to the peace that settled in his chest as images of Julie's cute glare crossed his mind. His blood ran hot as he thought back to their kiss. He had half expected her to shove his chest, slap him and walk out, or maybe just walk out because he was still her boss. But she had surprised him. She did neither. In fact, she had done the exact opposite and shocked him pleasantly to his bones. He rolled the car into his open garage. His decision made. He was going to do whatever she wanted to do, even if it involved staying indoor or watching a movie, or worse, watching some rom-com, whatever it was, as long as she talked to him and didn't pretend she didn't sneak a peek every time he changed into a different shirt, or massaged his neck, or groaned with each stretch of his tired joints. He grabbed his briefcase and walked the few steps to the floor. Maybe she decided to make them dinner? Surprise him? He grinned as he opened the door, half expecting her to be in the kitchen making a meal, whilst providing him decent enough entertainment in the form of her non-existent dance skills. His brows furrowed in confusion as he walked into an empty house. He listened for any sign of movement, but nothing. He freed his wrist from the cufflinks as he strolled to their shared bedroom. His forehead creased as he again walked into an empty room. There was no sign of Julie anywhere. Did she go out without informing him? It was unlike her, but maybe she tried reaching him and couldn't. He looked around the room for the black pencil skirt and blue blouse she had worn to work that day. Usually she kept them on the bed, saying she liked to air them first, but they weren't on the bed. Neither were they in the wardrobe. He shrugged his shirt off and headed to the bathroom. She probably went for a walk or something, he decided. As the water dropped from his hair, down his body, he was certain she had gone on an errand. Her car hadn't been in the driveway when he came in. If it were a walk, it would be there. A few minutes later, he turned off the shower and wrung the water from his hair. He wrapped a clean towel around his waist and hummed all the way to the wardrobe. He was a bit surprised to still see an empty room, but he refused to jump to conclusions. He threw on a sweatshirt and some joggers and headed to the kitchen. Maybe he could surprise her with dinner. He tried her number, but it went straight to voicemail. He mused. He shoved some cooking gloves on and got to work. Giving her previous taste in food, she'd appreciate what he had in mind. Spaghettini and meatballs with some curry sauce on the side. In a matter of hours, he exhaled in satisfaction. The smell of air-fried meat and boiled chicken filled the kitchen. He inhaled, a swell of pride crossed his chest as he admired his work. He set the table with absolute peace on his mind, her smile in his heart, and a hum at the back of his throat. He tried her number again. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again, the same thing. He sat and waited. It was already past 11 p.m. He could wait. She would be back in a matter of minutes. He dialed her number a few minutes later. Still nothing. Kai paced the room, unable to stop himself from thinking the worst. It is almost midnight, and she still wasn't back home. She hadn't called. He hadn't seen any sticky notes messages on the fridge, wardrobe, nothing. If she was okay, it would be a perfect time for her to show up. He didn't even care to know why she came late. He just needed to know she was safe and okay. He sent a text quickly demanding to know where she was. He waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. No response. He could feel his anger rising. If she wanted to prove her point that she didn't need or enjoy his company, other ways would be better. Being stubborn would only do nothing but make him even angrier. He shoved their dinner aside angrily. He knew she was stubborn, but this was itching too close to the line of overdoing it. He released a breath, turned the dishes in serving bowls and tossed them into the freezer, his appetite gone. He immediately went to bed. If she was going to go for stubbornness, he could too. She was beginning to feel too important anyways. He wrapped the sheets around himself and forced his mind to ignore her scent on the sheets. Kai took a final look at the house, half worried, half annoyed. Julie still wasn't back. She hadn't snuck into the house, called or bothered to return his texts. He shrugged the feeling off and got into his car. The drive to work was a quick one. He swerved through traffic smoothly, the only turbulence in his mind as he considered all the things he could do to Julie as OA back for making him worried last night, just to prove her point. He rolled the car into the parking lot and cut off the source before he stepped down. He walked to the elevator, nodded to everyone who bowed to greet as he walked by. The ride up was one that made him antsy and on edge. He didn't know what to expect with her. Was she going to apologize or go on the defensive and point out his obvious flaws to make him back down? The elevator dinged, drawing his attention back to the present. His eyes immediately searched for her as he stepped down from the elevator into the company lobby, which the supervisor had somehow turned into some sort of work aisle. His anger fled as his eyes settled on an empty desk. Julie's desk. Worry lines creases his forehead as he walked towards it. Where was she? His eyes met Ada's, who had been watching him. He stepped into the lobby. He immediately went to her desk. "Where's Julie?" He asked, uncaring what she thought about his sudden concern with her whereabouts. His heart sank as Ada frowned. "She hasn't come in today. I expected her to be with you," she said, confirming his fears. Where the hell was she? It definitely can't be her trying to prove a point if she didn't show up to work. Julie wasn't the type to miss work. Even when Ada had been thrown her way, she still showed up every single day, so what was going on? Images of the nights they had spent together, from fighting over who sleeps where to their little banters in the office, flooded his mind. His heart slowed as he considered all the possibilities. Was she even safe? How could he had gone to bed when he couldn't reach her? Her phone hadn't even rang. What's wrong? Ada's voice pierced through his worried mind. Kai looked back at her. I think Julie's missing. He told her, his voice shook for the first time since he could remember. Ada's eyes widened in shock. She immediately stood from her desk and shut her system off. We need to find her. She rushed, her feet already parried towards the elevator. We? He asked behind her. Yes, we. Julie is my friend. I'm allowed to be worried too. She tossed over her shoulder. I'd help, she said. Her voice left no room for argument. Kai clipped his mouth shut, nodded, and stepped into the elevator with her. Kai forced a hand through his already messy hair, frustrated. He spotted a forming eye bag, wore clothes that were, for the first time since as long as he could remember, rumpled. Ada wasn't looking any better either, which surprised Kai. When she had gotten closer to Julie, he had doubted her intentions, but all through the previous day, she had been just as eager for the search as he was, if not more. We need to split up, cover more ground that way, Kai suggested. I'd check her usual route home again. Maybe I missed something yesterday. He told her, already headed in the opposite direction. Ada nodded. I'd check her personal home. Hopefully there's something there that could help. Good idea, he called over his shoulder, his feet already retracing her possible path from his house. Kai zeroed in on her familiar scent as he walked down the path. His pushed all his six senses to the height of their extent. He could still smell her, but it was faint, almost absent, not strong enough to trace. He spotted an old man lounging on his front porch and shrugged as he headed towards him. What other choice did he have? Good morning, sorry to disturb, but he pulled out a picture from his back pockets. Have you seen this lady around recently? He asked. The old man took his time before he finally reached where Kai stood on the other side of the mini gate that separated his front porch from the walkway. He touched the edge of the picture and accessed it before shaking his head. No, sorry, he said, sincerity behind those eyes. Your girlfriend? Kai wanted to shove the picture back in his poster and leave, but instead he said, my wife. A smile played on his lips as his words registered. The old man mirrored his smile. I'd be sure to look out for her then. He grabbed onto the arm of his chair as he reassumed his position on his lounge chair. Don't give up, he said. Kai's brows creased as he looked at the man. He felt strange getting any form of comfort from a stranger, but that wasn't the important matter. He nodded and left, holding on to those words. He couldn't give up, not even as he asked every single person he came across, every passerby, not even as he sniffed for any luck of a stronger scent. He couldn't give up. Julie needed him. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was in trouble. It was unlike her not to show up to work. She basically lived in that office before, so it made no sense that she would skip. She would have called in sick or something, but still, they lived together. All she had to do was tell him, but even he hadn't seen her. It worried him. He couldn't afford to give up. Good day. Did you come across her any time this week? He shoved the picture in another passerby's face, his mind getting antsy the more he heard the words. No, sorry. The lady who looked to be a shop attendant raised the picture to her face. Yeah, I did, she nodded, took a second look at the picture, and Kai could see the resolve in her eyes. Finally a lead. Where? When? Where did she go? He rushed, unable to contain his worry. Actually, 2 days ago. It was already late, so I'd assume it was around 5 p.m. Kai's ears perked up at that. That was just after she left for work. Do you remember what she was wearing? He asked in a softer tone so as not to spook her. She your girlfriend? She arched a brow at him, her eyes turned suspicious. My wife. And she hasn't been at home or at work for 2 days now. He didn't understand why he felt the need to explain to a total stranger his relationship, or why he got defensive, but he was at the edge with worry. For all he knew, she could be trapped somewhere, with no means of escape, no form of communication. Her eyes widened in surprise. Oh, sorry, she said sheepishly. Usually Kai would have reveled in shutting her up, but with Julie missing, he couldn't care less. He didn't have time to watch her blush. So? He urged. Oh yeah, sorry. She shook her head as if she'd snapped out of a daze. Not entirely, but I remember she ran right across the road without looking and would have gotten run over if the driver hadn't hit the brakes last minute. She squinted her eyes like she was replaying the scene in her mind. That didn't sound like Julie. She was usually too scared of being turned to mashed meat beneath the tires of a car. She obsessed over looking before crossing. Was she in a hurry somewhere, or was she running from someone? Thank you so much, he said, completely sincere. She'd given him the first proper lead since he'd been asking. Just glad I can help, she smiled. Kai moved to leave them halted. Something bothered him, and he couldn't shake the feeling. You said she ran right across and almost got hit. Did the driver get down and apologize or offer her a ride? He knew he sounded strange asking, but if whoever was in that car did, Julie was believing enough to get in. The girl shook her head and his shoulder sagged, only to tense up a second later when he realized that only meant he didn't have a clue who could have her. He didn't, but there was a strange man right behind her, she thought aloud. He even crossed the road right after she did. She yelled as if she just remembered something important. And indeed she had. It only confirmed his suspicions. Julie had been running from someone. Do you remember what he looked like? Anything he had on that stood out to you? Maybe his hair? He rushed, his worry rose by the minute. Someone had been after her. Her shoulder drooped. No, he had a hoodie on. Sorry, she muttered. I had just assumed it was a coincidence, so I didn't really bother to follow up. She shrugged, her eyes apologetic. Kai nodded. Thank you, he said and turned to leave. He crossed the road and moved forward, his nose still sniffed for her scent. It was very faint, but it began to get stronger. He followed her scent to a supermarket lot. The mart was still closed, but he was sure Julie had been there when his eyes settled on the chocolate bar sign right beside the front door to the supermarket. He sniffed the air. Her scent was much stronger. She had definitely been there, and spent quite some time too. He looked around the lot. Big supermarkets usually had surveillance cameras, he thought. His eyes zeroed in on each and every corner for even the tiniest camera, but nothing, not even a single standard camera. Shit, he yelled. What were you doing in a blind spot, Julie? He muttered to himself. He frowned as a strange scent clashed with hers and overshadowed it. He groaned in frustration, slipped down the side of a wall, his hands in his head. Please still be alive, he prayed to the moon goddess, at a dead end. He was certain this was the last place she had been. Her scent had trailed off past the lot. If he was going to get any clue as to her whereabouts, his best bet was the lot, but there weren't even surveillance cameras anywhere. His eyes searched, but he couldn't find anything of hers, or even something from whoever had followed her to that point. Not a pen, phone, not even her car was in the lot, and she had left in it. He had just been about to give up and call it a day when the old man's words ran through his mind. Don't give up. What was he thinking? Was he really about to head back to the comfort of his home, knowing fully well Julie could be laying dead in a ditch somewhere if he didn't find her soon enough? But what more could he do? His werewolf abilities didn't seem to help much since her scent had been so faint. Suddenly, a feeling settled in his chest. He recognized his wolf immediately. The strange scent, it smelled like a drug. Kai sniffed the air again. It was a drug. Kai's eyes widened as he remembered. It was a drug only Ada's pack produced. There was no doubt in his mind. Julie had been attacked right there at the parking lot. But was Ada involved in it? Hey, I got your message. Kai's attention was pulled from the trace of the scent at the sound of Ada's ashy voice. What do you mean you think Julie has been attacked? Ka rose from his position on the ground, his dress shirt crinkled with the action. Yeah, don't you smell it? He asked. His eyes followed her as she moved around him and towards the spot where the smell of the drug was highest. Her eyes widened and she turned to Kai. Her face mirrored his when he'd first smelled it. This doesn't make any sense, she muttered. She knew what he must be thinking. The drug flying in the air was none other than valerian, a drug produced only by her pack, one so rare they had to find a way to drag out the effect of one stem into several vials of the drug. Doesn't it, though? Kai quirked a brow at her. He wasn't saying it, but she knew what he meant. His body language screamed it. He thought she had something to do with Julie getting attacked. Her blood boiled at the poorly veiled allegation. She slammed her eyes shut and balled her hands into fists to stop from lashing at him. He was hurt and worried. His Luna was nowhere to be found. She could understand his like of thinking. If the roles were reversed, she'd assume the same too. I had nothing to do with this. She pointed at the spot, her eyes fixed on his so he'd see the sincerity behind hers. I really didn't, she repeated, her hands raised halfway in a surrender. That drug can only be gotten from someone from your pack. You have motive, he listed out, stalking towards her, and you left few minutes after she did. His eyes lifted to her, his assumption impossible to miss. Ada's panic rose. My father called. She rushed. Yes, add that to the list too, he said, closing the distance. Your father wasn't so subtle about his disapproval of Julie, who knows what you both worked out together. He pushed, barely an arm length away. Ada fought the urge to move backwards, away from his piercing gaze. The last thing she needed was for him to take her need for self-preservation as another point to her guilt. Look, I know what it looks like, and I really can't blame you for assuming that. I would too, but I really didn't touch a hair on Julie's head. She explained, her feet itches to move. You don't have to touch your victim to orchestrate a kidnap. He countered just a foot away. Ada groaned. Why can't you just believe me? She snapped. Was I annoyed when you suddenly brought up marrying Julie? Yes, absolutely, I was livid. I mean, our families already spoke. You were as informed as much as I was before our blind date. She yelled, her calm slipped. She couldn't bear the thought of Julie being hurt, let alone be the one to cause it. Kai's jaw ticked at the mention of the blind date. But, Ada stressed, grabbing his attention, Julie became more than the human girl that stole my man. I was never your man. Kai corrected, his jaw taut. Still, she continued, as far as I was concerned, we both wanted to be together, so I considered you my man at the time, and she was nothing but the girl that took that from me. Her eyes dropped, ashamed she had thrown herself at him so many times in the past when he so obviously hadn't taken her seriously. After the bonding ritual, there was no point competing with her. Only a fool would see what I saw that day and still believe you were anything short of in love with her, and I knew I had no chance. As long as she was alive, Kai drawled, still not ready to believe her little sob story. Can you quit that? She snapped. What? Reading between the lines of your little tale? He countered, trying to paint the truth as anything but that. And who says that's the truth? I do, and Julie would too if she was here. Kai's eyes snapped to her, a warning laid behind them. Ada clamped her lips shut. Look, I didn't handle the rejection well, okay, but Julie is impossible to hate. Imagine I poured my heart out to her without filter, and for the first time ever, someone wasn't quick to point a judging finger at me and call me spoilt or ungrateful. She recollected. A smile played on her lips as she remembered the night that marked the beginning of her friendship with Julie. You know what she did instead? Her eyes lifted to Kai, who still watched her with suspicion. She advised me. I followed it, and I couldn't be more grateful to her for it. She continued, Julie is my friend. I would never hurt her, she assured. Kai still held his reservations. In their world, it was a typical dog-eat-dog world. He knew better than to believe a story just because it sounded cute. Even though you don't believe me, it doesn't matter, but I'd get to the bottom of it, she assured. Kai could have stopped her, but he didn't. If she was going to investigate, he was going to let her. The only problem would arise when she came back with nothing. Ada nodded and left. Can I get a copy of the record? The tribe doctor, Xana, gestured for her apprentice. Get me our records for valerian vials and the herb as well, she instructed. The apprentice, a lanky boy with curly ginger hair, nodded and left. Why do you need this again? Xana asked. Oh, nothing really. It's more for research than anything. Ada lied through her teeth. She hated lying to Xana, but she couldn't risk anyone knowing her true intent, especially if Julie's attacker could be from her own pack, could even be one of Xana's apprentices. Ada searched the eyes of every wolf wearing the signature white doctor hat her tribe used. Xana hummed, but her eyes searched Ada's. She didn't believe her, but she knew better than to question Ada's judgment. She knew the child was a bit troubled, but she always seems to make the right decisions in the end, so she was just going to have to trust her. The boy returned soon with multiple ledgers and handed them to Ada, who took them with controlled eagerness. Thank you, she muttered to him, her attention zapped by the ledgers. I'd be sure to return these soon enough, she assured. Xana shrugged. I know you will, she smiled. Ada returned her smile and left the straw house behind. The other apprentices nodded as she made her exit, and she nodded at each one on acknowledgments before leaving. She took in a deep breath as she exited the shack, her first actual intake of free air. Xana always had one herb or the other burning in her shack, and that time had been no different. Ada hid the average-sized ledgers as best she could as she headed to her room. She took the secret hallway known to only the lower-ranking werewolves, exited at the far end of the tunnel, and took a quick turn to the hall that led to her bedroom. She couldn't shake the feeling that she couldn't trust anyone. She knew it was impossible to do so if her goal was to find anything useful. The drug in question was no mere drug. It wasn't easily accessible to lower-ranked werewolves. Only the top of the top werewolves could even think of getting their hands on it. She had no choice but to be discreet as possible. She flipped the lock immediately she crossed her doorway. She dumped the ledgers on the bed and crossed her legs. She flipped through pages. The records were meticulous, to say the least. They held dates as far back as when her parents were still in their mother's wombs, ranks, the number of vials, and the suppliers, but the names of the receivers were left out for the safety of whoever they were. Valerian was as rare as diamonds and drove even the most noble men to dirt if the need for it arose. Her fingers ran through the names painstakingly slow. She paused as she saw a date suspiciously close to the day Julie went missing. Her fingers trailed to the name of the supplier, Dr. Fila. She tapped down his contact information on her phone and hit dial. It barely rang twice before a voice came from the other end. "Hello?" he asked. "Yeah, it's Ada, Alpha Dan's daughter," she hurriedly introduced, cutting through formalities. "I'm calling about a Valerian vial," she added, and awaited his response. The sound of movement distracted her for a few moments, then the voice is back. "Oh yes, I deliver quite a number of those. Which in particular? Can I get a date, ma?" He sounded distant, the sound of a book flipping more audible than his voice. Ada traced her fingers back to the date. "About 5 days ago," she informed him. "Towards evening," she added, reading from the ledger. "Oh, only one person came for Valerian vials that day," he said, his voice suddenly conflicted. "Oh? Who?" "I just sent you a sample of the record from that day," he informed. Sure enough, her phone chimed. Ada's eyes widened. The phone slipped from her grip as she traced his record with the name of the receiver not scraped out. She must be hallucinating. She had to be. There was absolutely no way her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. She shut and reopened her eyes, but the name remained the same, Alpha Dan. It read. Her father acquired Valerian vial. The phone slipped from her hands. Kai had suspected her father due to his outburst at their bonding ceremony, but even as the words had left his lips, Ada immediately dismissed them. Her father was known to be hot-headed sometimes, but she never believed he would actually let his anger go that far. No, none of it added up. She needed to get to the bottom of it, and there was only one person who could give her actual answers, not speculations. She hid the ledgers beneath 2 throw pillows. She needed to see him. She shoved her sheets from her legs and stormed out of the room. She shoved the door aside angrily. Her father swerved in the direction of the ruckus, his features relaxed as his eyes settled on Ada. "I wouldn't be so quick to relax if I were you," she muttered under her breath. "Why would you barge into my space like that?" Dan snapped. His furious eyes trailed from Ada's head to her booted feet. "Did you acquire some Valerian vials recently?" she asked. There was no need beating around the bush. It would only give him time to think up lies. The shock appeared for all but a millisecond, and it was gone. "Yes, and so?" He shrugged, but his shoulders weren't as loose as they should be. He was hiding something, and Ada swore to find out exactly what. "I know you are behind it," she tested. His middle finger flicked upwards. She was right. He knew she was very close to home, too. "Why, father? Why would resort to something so despicable?" she demanded. The initial indifference he tried for vanished from his eyes. When he looked back at Ada, his eyes were cold, the resolve behind them solids. "Because Kai disrespect our tribe." His voice sent chills down her spine. She had known him all her life, but somehow she had missed the cold alpha in him. He regarded her with cold annoyance as he said, "He rejected you, he repeated. His anger bubbled through his words. And for what? That human who could barely protect herself in the human society, let alone in our world. It's simply ridiculous, and he needs to be reminded that our tribe isn't one to be disrespected without some consequence. I won't tolerate that, Ada. Not while I still breathe." Ada was shocked, silent at the words that left his mouth. Who was this man, and what had he done to her father? How could he speak so easily about drugging someone like it was a regular Tuesday? So what? Pick the weakest of the 2 offenders to pick on? Is that what we do now? Is that what our tribe is about? She fired, her own anger simmered with each word. 2 birds, 1 stone. He shrugged. He assumed his position on his throne-like chair. I needed to teach the young alpha a memorable lesson, and lucky Julie was the perfect way to do so. He drawled, his tone bored. And what did Julie do? What was so horrible that she has to be the one to suffer? Accept Kai's proposal? Damn, Dad. There was literally nothing she could have done, not with the situation of things. She forced through gritted teeth. She wasn't going to lose her cool with him. That would be giving him exactly what he wanted. I needed to get rid of the little troublemaker, and plus, the young alpha seems to feel something strong for her. He tossed her way, which only further aggravated her. Maybe now his head would be slapped on straight and he comes to his senses. The pride in his voice was irritating to listen to. Everything he had said did nothing but expose absolute defense of tribal dignity, and his ruthless pursuit of his personal interest veiled under the guise of protecting the tribe. She balled her hand into fist. Her blood boiled as she regarded her father's nonchalance, like he hadn't had a girl drugged, but kidnapped as well. And his explanation for his actions only made things worse, only made her even more furious that he would stoop to such depths just to prove his point, to get his way, to get revenge. There was nothing else he could say to her that would redeem him of what he had so boldly and pridefully admitted. Yes, he was her father, but she wasn't like him. She wasn't going to deceive herself that everyone else but her were the problem. What he did, what he was doing was not only immoral, but absurd and dangerous, not for just him, but for the tribe he claimed to be so dutiful about protecting. Kai wasn't the type to forgive and forget and throw it under the carpet. No, Kai was a firm believer of an eye for an eye, and he had never missed an opportunity to prove it. "Who did you send?" she demanded, not bothered enough to control her anger. "I would not be answering to my own daughter," he grumbled. "Would you rather answer to your treasured tribe, then?" She fired back, her glare fixed on the man she was suddenly ashamed to call her father. She had promised herself she would be a better person, if not to everyone, but to Julie and her father had done nothing but ruin the relationship she'd been building with them. "Who did you send?" She stalked towards him as she dragged out. Dan stood his ground. He was the adult, but most of all the higher-ranking werewolf. He was not about to bow to the will of his own pup. He snarled as she got closer. "Who did you send, father?" Ada growled. Her eyes threatened to do something insane if he wasn't agreeable enough soon. Dan stared her down. His eye color shifted from burnt brown to a bright red hue. Ada stood her ground. She refused to be swayed his angry flash. Her eyes shifted from blue to a bright red hue, as well as she growled, "Shove me their names and address if you really are doing this, whatever this is supposed to be, for the tribe." She could feel his fuming breathe on her face. But if he was stupid enough to put everyone at risk, whatever respect he had earned over the years would have been nothing but fairy dust. "If you don't, I might just let my lips loose and let the tribe know exactly what their alpha has been up to before you even get the chance to lay a finger on her," she threatened. The power tussle between them was palpable, none ready to yield. Ada turned to walk out, ready to tell everyone she met exactly what her father was capable of. If he was going to sit there and hold on his self-righteousness and the bullshit he gave as an excuse for doing something so immoral, then she held no responsibility to him and she owed it to the tribe to let them know the truth. "Wait," he called from behind her. Ada halted, halfway through the door already. She turned and arched a brow at him. She'd said enough already. The last thing she was going to do was beg him to make up for his stupid decisions. "It was the ex-boyfriend, Adrian," he admitted reluctantly. Ada nodded and left. There was no way she was going to thank him for doing what he should have done from the very beginning. She still couldn't believe he not only thought about something that drastic, let alone actually went ahead with it. Immediately, she settled back in the safety of her room. She dialed Kai's personal number. He picked up on the first ring. "Any luck?" he asked. Ada contemplated telling him in person, but she reconsidered. The last thing she needed was for Kai to think she was somehow in support of her father's actions by buying him any more time to harm Julie. "Yes, my father, She trailed off, unsure how to break it to him. On the one hand, she would love for her father to feel Kai's wrath, but Julie's ex-boyfriend, Adrian, he's the one that has her. She rushed, deliberately cutting out how her father supplied the drug before she had the chance to change her mind. Julie needed her to be a good friend now more than ever. She wasn't going to let her down. But she also wasn't going to put her father in the crossfire that was Kai's fury. Kai's fingers shook as he stared at the screen. The video was right there, stared right back at him, but he couldn't just do it. Her face looked worn and exhausted, like she hadn't been fed properly. His blood boiled as he saw how matted her hair looked, a stark contrast to her usual treated hair. Her eyes were lids shut. His hands trembled as he tapped the screen. The pause sign disappeared immediately. The video began with Julie tied to a chair in a dimly lit room. She was breathing, but it was faint, too faint. Kai's grip on the device tightened as he zoomed on her face. Unmistakable bruises marked every curve of her face. That bastard! Adrian's laughter cut through the haze he was trapped in. The mockery echoed through the video. It taunted him, tested his patience. His eyes darkened as the sound pierced through his eardrums like sharp needles, all attacking the same point at the same time. Each sound that escaped his lips, each taunting laugh jabbed at his heart. He was going to kill the bastard. His eyes settled on the bruises that marred her face, her forearm. The soon-to-be dead wolf had been busy. A silver blade appeared on the screen, a little too close to Julie's skin for comfort. His heart curled, twisted and knotted painfully tight, like someone used a knife to peel on it like an orange. The muscle in his jaw ticked, a sudden jump as he waited to see Adrian's next move. For his sake, his life, he really hoped that blade didn't go any closer to her skin. Just when it did, the blade sat right on her skin. Adrian appeared fully, blocking Kai's view of Julie's unconscious form. His face remained partly hidden by his overgrown beard. He had a smile, even if it were a sick one, but his eyes told the tale his expression didn't. They were cold and cruel, dead and lost. Adrian crouched beside Julie and looked dead at the camera, like he knew someone would be on the other side of it, watching him. If you want to save her, you'd listen carefully and do exactly as I say. I know the mere thought of that would sound like an abomination to you, but it's fine. I mean, this is exactly why I'm doing this now, isn't it? He mocked. A sinister smile played on his lips. The knife swung and curved between his fingers. He balled his hands into fist. His claws slipped out slowly and dug into the skin of his palm. He could just picture the bastard's neck between them. He promised to drain the life from him slowly, watch him while he gasped for air as much as he hurt Julie. You have till just before sunrise. The voice cut through his murderous thoughts. Meet me at the Kenland Old Bridge. His voice leaked of cockiness. It annoyed Kai even more. He griped the phone tighter. The metal device shook with each squeeze of his palm. If I were you, I wouldn't be late or try a thing funny like say. He dragged, tapped on his chin as if in deep thought, then snapped his fingers together like he just got a bright idea. Bring someone along. Come alone, he demanded. The video stopped then. A white flash appeared just before the screen turned black. The room remained deathly silent, despite the number of people in the room. His betas watched him with caution. Their eyes looked at everywhere but him. The anger radiated off him enough to make the already hot room even hotter. He gripped the edge of his seat even tighter. He hated it. He hated being at the mercy of anyone, much less someone as worthless as Julie's ex-boyfriend, Adrian. But did he really have a choice? Was there anything he could really do? He had no idea where Adrian had her anyways. If he did, then that would be a different case. Adrian wouldn't still have the tongue to speak, but he didn't, and they'd left no clue to help. Kai slammed his eyes shut. A groan vibrated from his throat. Why did he have to take her? Things were just getting better between them, and he had to pull a stunt like that? The room was as useless of a clue as Adrian was. Dimly lit room that could be any building. The lighting made it impossible to grab a proper description of anything else in the room. All he could get from the video was the chair she was tightly held to. He wasn't totally sure, but some instruments on the table as well, and of course, the bastard who was soon going to be history the moment he got his hands on him. He blew a long breath. Fuming and planning his death wasn't helping. They weren't ideas that would bring Julie back to him. They only made him angrier and more likely to make horrible decisions. He shoved down all thoughts of Adrian and how daring he was. He needed to go along with what Adrian said. There was no way around it. Julie didn't look like she was just missing some days. She looked like she got a new bruise every time Adrian felt bored and needed some entertainment. You can't possibly be considering his offer, one of his betas, Leo said, his tone on the edge of fear and amazement. Kai looked to him. He knew he shouldn't be, but there were no other options. He has a point. The sound of Ada's voice amongst the others was most shocking. If he'd learnt anything the past few days, it was the fact that Ada hadn't been full of horse shit when she said she considered Julie a friend. She had proven just how much she would be willing to go for Julie's safety, so hearing her disagree to an option that meant Julie returning to them, to him, was shocking to say the least. "What other option is there?" he grumbled. He couldn't appear weak in the presence of his subordinates or Ada, but it's been days, and he still hadn't felt Julie in his arms, still hadn't actually made sure she was alive. For all he knew, the video Adrian had sent might have been an old one, and Julie could already be dead or lying in a ditch somewhere. He swallowed hard at the thought. He found it hard to stomach the thought of Julie being anything but alive. "I'm sure we'd come up with something soon," Ada offered. "We do not need to take actions yet, not until we're certain he really has her." "Didn't you see the video? I know the guy. He's pulled a similar stunt before." He pinched the bridge of his nose, more than once. Suddenly he felt annoyed at himself. Why hadn't he handled the scum when he had the chance? Why had he been so lax when he found out Adrian had escaped the dungeon? Ada looked at him in shock, but her resolve was less shaken by Julie's disappearance as Kai's was. She needed to be the one making the logical decisions. Someone had to, if not, shit could hit the fan and they lose Julie for good. "That doesn't mean anything. It could be an old video." Another beta, Xander mirrored his thoughts. Kai glared at him. It was already difficult to convince himself otherwise. He didn't need another person solidifying his fears. "It is not an old video." Kai grounded out. Ada shook her head. "We don't know that." She tested carefully. Her eyes watched his for any red signs. The last thing she needed to do was infuriate him more than he already was. "Until we do," she continued. His jaw ticked and she stopped. "Till we do, we can't take any drastic actions like go out on your own to confront him, regardless of what he promises or not," Ada advised. Kai leaned back on his chair, implying, "I can't handle myself against a gamma." He quirked a brow at her. He had already made up his mind, and nothing they had to say could change it, not when Julie was in danger. "I'm sure she didn't mean it that way." Leo rushed. Kai glared at him, and he shut up immediately. "There's no point to all of this," he grunted. His voice took on a decisive tone. "I have made my decision. I would not allow my wife be subjected to even one more day of suffering, and that's final." He rose to his feet, his unwavering resolve regarding his decision clear for all to see. Julie woke up feeling exhausted, almost like she'd run a 200-mile marathon without a single meal. Her eyes fluttered open, only slam shut as a painful sensation ran through her head. She lifted her hand to grab her temple and winced when the rope tugged against it, pulling it down almost immediately. She swallowed hard and tried again. She released a breath as her eyes adjusted to the sim lighting in the room. Nothing had changed. Everything was still placed in the spot she had last seen them. The only thing missing was the tray the redhead mute had brought the food in for that day. She frowned as her eyes settled on Adrian. She was hoping for just one day free of his presence, but maybe she wasn't really that lucky after all. He had his phone to his ear and seemed animated with whatever the person on the other end of the phone had to say. This could be her chance. Her heart raced as she looked around. There was nothing close enough. Adrian had been paranoid enough to remove everything. Even the cutlery she'd hoped to steal after eating had be plastic, soft, bendable plastic. She glared at the back of his head. She wished he could have transferred his stupidity to that aspect, but for some reason he seemed to have everything about her capture perfectly planned out. To think only months ago, she had harbored thought of walking down the aisle with him, and now all she thought about was how she could spit on him bullseyes in his eyes. The irony of it all made her laugh out loud like a deranged person. Maybe she was deranged. It's been days with nothing but his hideous-looking face and beards, and a deaf mute delivering food once a day. Nothing else. Adrian turned at the sound. He threw a strange look her way. The smile he wore before shifted to confusion. The phone was still stuck tight against his ear, So he's going to be coming alone, yes? He asked into the phone, but his eyes watched Julie, afraid she'd gone mad. He grinned when an ashy voice confirmed, yes, he wouldn't hear otherwise. He cut the call and walked to Julie, an unusual bounce in his steps. The closer he got, the wider her smile became. Maybe she had gone mad. What was so amusing? He demanded. Julie's eyes lifted to his. There was a crazed look in them, but she was sure hers had begun to reflect his. She held her peace. He could keep her trapped all he wanted, but he could not force her to speak against her will, too. Her head dropped down, partly because she was exhausted and partly because she was tired of staring at his sorry excuse for a face. Are you deaf, dumb, or do you need me to remind you how to use that voice box of yours? He snapped. Julie lifted her head to him, opened her mouth like she actually planned to speak, then let her head fall back down without giving him what he wanted, what he demanded. Adrian fumed. She could hear the air leave his flaring nostrils. She knew what came next. As predicted, Adrian's hand gripped her neck with painful force. Julie held her breath. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her choke. He gripped tighter. The of his fingers dug into the nape of her neck so hard. She coughed and sputtered. She reached for his hand to pull it away and winced when yet again it was dragged fro evil down by the stupid knot. Her teary eyes widened as she felt like she would pass out. Please. She choked out with her last breath. Adrian's hand left her throat immediately. The word left her lips. That would teach you never to defy me again. He snarled. It was so quick, Julie began to question if her sanity was the problem. One moment he had a murderous look in his eyes, and the next, they shone bright like he'd been told he won the damn lottery of something along the line. But just because I'm in a good mood today, I'd let you off easy. Repeat whatever that was, and you might not be so lucky next time. His eyes held a promise. Julie shrunk back from him. Anywho, good news, he yelled, rocking back and forth on the ball of his feet. Julie remained as she was, silent and not giving a fuck what he felt was worth celebrating or not. She expected anger or demands and orders thrown her way about how she could behave better. She waited for it. Adrian grinned. Your little boyfriend would be coming to take you home. His hands clapped together, but the shock of that was nothing compared to the shock coursing through her. He was coming? For her? She was going to survive this somehow? Hope sprang within her. Or coming to be sent home to the moon goddess, but same difference. He waved his hand dismissively like he actually believed the words that left his mouth. Julie's eyes widened in dismay. Of course it wasn't going to be that easy. Nothing ever was. You bastard! She cried. Her voice vibrated with the effort. You're such a despicable human being. She spat at his shoes, but he moved at the last second. I am not a weak human, he yelled in her face. And if you want to blame anyone, blame him. He brought it on himself. He had successfully pissed a lot of people, and I happened to be one of the few wrong ones he messed with. He snarled. His eyes shifted colors for a second before they returned to their default color. Julie blew out puffs of air. There was nothing she could do. Whatever Adrian had planned was nothing good, nothing Kai should walk into, especially not for her. Adrian had thought her capture for too long if the measures he put in place were anything to go by. Whatever you're planning wouldn't work, she yelled. But even as she said it, she couldn't believe it. She couldn't shake the fear she felt, fear for Kai's life. Oh, but it will, Adrian countered. Brilliantly, might I add. He smiled. Julie had never seen him this happy, not even when they were together. It was nerve-wracking to see it now. In fact, I can promise you that if your little hero actually shows up tonight, he would be just a body by morning. He laughed aloud, a deep, hearty laugh. What do you mean? Her voice broke as she asked. His laughter deepened. I was getting to that, he said through fits of laughter. He moved to the table of instruments and picked up a basket. This would be his undoing, he boasted. Julie arched a brow at him. She couldn't picture Kai dying because of a mere woven basket. It looked normal from all indications. If Adrian's plan had been to trap Kai, maybe she could have considered the possibilities even if she didn't see the chance of it actually working for that either. But he'd sounded so proud, certain, there had to be more to it. I know you're confused. That's a good sign. It means I didn't waste the past weeks. His smile spread impossibly wider. His eyes crinkled at the sides. You see, it's a specially crafted basket that would be tied to his damsel in distress. You, he pointed at her like he actually needed to, would uncontrollably pull the basket. When your hero inevitably shows up, he would untie you from it, ready to take you home as quickly as possible. But want to know what he'd end up doing instead? Adrian asked. His fingers played with the carefully woven edges of the basket. Julie looked at Julie but didn't utter a wire. She wanted to know, but if she interrupted him now that he felt comfortable enough to gloat, he might clamp up and that would be worst. Her hands balled into fist as the urge to punch him in the face became overwhelming. He would basically be giving his life for you. Isn't that just so romantic? He coped. He burst into laughter only a second later, a maniacal one. This innocent-looking basket has 2 hidden gems, spikes sharp enough to pierce through even an alpha's defenses, and my favorite part. He clapped and gave Julie a toothy smile, a bomb triggered by the basket's free fall. He added, his voice had lost all sweetness. It was only cold and expectant. Julie's eyes widened in realization. It was either Kai left her tied to the basket or free her and activate the basket, which exposes himself. She was stunned by how malicious a person could actually be. You're really the scum of the earth. Even humans are better than you. Adrian swung back and slapped her so hard her head turned to the side. His eyes were a deep shade of red. She could feel the anger ooze off of him, but she was too stunned to move. How dare you? You're the reason I'm in this mess. If only you'd been a good little gullible human like you've been for years, everything would have worked perfectly. I wouldn't be here. His voice boomed across the room. He reached for her hair, about to yank it, but paused. He went silent, the only sound in the room, Julie's rapid breathing. His ears perked up. Footsteps. Footsteps approached from the top of the building. With a sense of urgency, Adrian pulled Julie to the center of the room, strapped her tightly to the basket of death, and yanked on the free end of the rope. Julie rose higher with each tug of the rope. Adrian, satisfied with the height, smiled cheekily at her before leaving the room. He cut across the main hall and grinned when his eyes settled on Kai. He rushed to meet him halfway. Good to see even you can take instructions once in a while. I was beginning to lose all faith and was just about to end her suffering. He shrugged, hiding a smirk. Kai's eyes flared and Adrian's lips widened. If you dare lay a fin, Kai fumed. No, what do you take me for? Adrian placed a hand over his heart. I didn't lay a single finger on her, he exclaimed. If you say a hand, both hands, a knife, then we'd be at an agreement, but a finger, definitely no. He taunted. Kai's eyes darkened and he lunged for him, seeing nothing but rage. Hey now. If you want to see her alive, I strongly advise against that. Kai halted immediately. His claws dug into his palm. He couldn't forget the most important reason he was there. What do you want? He demanded. Oh, nothing much. Adrian dragged. Just something really simple. His eyes lit up in mischief before he said, Kneel. Kai looked at him in pure disbelief. Surely he didn't mean that. He wanted an alpha, his alpha, to kneel before him, a mere gamma. Impossible. I'm waiting, Adrian called. Kai slammed his eyes shut. His knees would be the last thing he saw before he died, he swore to himself. He dropped down, his knees met wet, green grass. Adrian laughed like a hyena, his enjoyment unveiled. Oblivious to the werewolf behind the thick patch of bushes, the concealment spell keeping her hidden from both men. Ada thanked the moon goddess for giving her such strong concealment abilities as she stealthily slid beneath the bushes. Kai refused to take anyone with him, but he said nothing about anyone following him of their own free will. Julie's head dipped lower. The broken window was high enough that she could peer through. She tilted her head to the side at a painful angle, but she could see what went on outside just enough to know who was who. She saw a familiar figure arrive and approach Adrian, but she couldn't jump into conclusions. It could just be in her head, her heart's wishful thinking. Would someone like Kai really come all the way for her? Or more absurd, risk his life for her? Her eyes glistened with tears as Kai came into view. There was no mistaking it, not when his hair was held back in a gelled whiff. His shirt crinkled with each step he took closer to the building. His usual calm was stuck in place, but she could see the seams, the ends laid loose. he'd been worried. The only thing unusual about it wasn't his slowly darkening eyes or the tension in his shoulders. No, those basically happened every other day. What Julie found most unusual were his bloodshot eyes, like he hadn't slept a wink in days. Her heart yet just thinking about it. Was he really that worried, or was she once again just wishing for things she knew weren't true? On one hand, she wanted more than anything to believe that Kai had been worried and had come for her. On the other hand, she couldn't help the disbelief. It wasn't just to show up, but to show up alone, so he definitely knew he would be risking his life for her, that he might not make it back alive. Yet he came either way. He showed up for her. Relief washed through her despite her doubt. He was here, and that was all that mattered. It didn't matter his reason. It didn't matter whether it was because he was worried or just didn't want to look weak. What mattered is he was there, and she would be rescued. She would be safe and away from Adrian soon. But would he? Would Kai be safe? Her eyes ran up the rope that held her strapped to the basket. Was Adrian bluffing, or would Kai actually be walking to his death by trying to rescue her? The basket looked innocent enough, like a regular woven basket. But she saw something shiny, something so subtle it was very easy. It would be too easy to miss, especially if the sole focus was on untying someone from said basket. Her heart lunged into her throat at the thought of Kai being hurt, or worse, blown up in bits just because he tried to save her. She dipped her head lower still to see the two men conversing, the exchange intense, but it was obvious who had the upper hand in the bargain. They stopped talking for a moment. Kai slipped down. Julie's eyes widened as she stared in disbelief. If her hands were free, she would be wiping her eyes to make sure they weren't leaving her and seeing things that weren't really there. Kai knelt before Adrian. The action indicated obedience, but the glare he gave Adrian was anything but. It was the exact opposite. Her heart skipped a beat as the two men began moving. Adrian took the lead, and Kai followed silently. Julie's ears perked up as their footsteps became audible. She held her breath as she waited. Adrian strutted in first, the confidence he felt in his plan obvious with each bounce. Julie gasped, the relief she felt overwhelming. Kai walked in looking a shadow of himself, but she was just too happy to see him again. She felt like she was taking her first breath in a very long time. Kai looked to Adrian, a brow arched in his direction. "I mean, you're already here. You might as well." Adrian shrugged, seeming nonchalant as he gestured towards a scared Julie tied to the basket. He tried to, but Julie saw through his blank mask. A smirk crept up his lips as Kai hurried to Julie's side. "Kai, you need to leave," Julie hurriedly warned, the panic in her eyes alarming, but not enough to sway him from his choice. He was already there. He had already risked looking out of control to be there by her side, rescue her and take her home. He wasn't going to back down just because she felt Adrian could hurt him. No matter what he did, Adrian was still a Gamma, and he an Alpha. He just wished Julie saw and remembered that no Gamma could win a fight against him, not even if they took the most potent vials. Kai took a glance at the contraption beside her, a puzzled look in his eyes. Julie opened her mouth to once again warn him before it was too late. "Kai, you need help with that." Adrian cut in. He threw a smirk at Julie as he approached where Kai stood just beneath the basket. "I'd lend a hand," he smiled. Kai watched him with suspicion in his eyes. He knew better than to trust him, but he knew to accept when he was ignorant about something. "Here," Adrian called. He flung a knife up and the rope snapped with just one kiss from the sharp blade. Adrian watched with glee as the basket came tumbling down. The sound of trinkets immediately followed, and spikes shot out from the sides and bottom of the basket. Julie shrieked as the air around her swept over. The force from her fall caused the cold to sting her ears as she dropped from the height. Kai swung into action immediately. He rushed to the spot Julie was, completely ignoring the innocent-looking basket as he rushed to be just beneath it to catch her just before she hit the ground. Julie watched in horror as Kai raced for the basket, the determination clear, the cogs in his brain spun, the thought reflected in his eyes. Julie knew what he was thinking. He was going to disarm it to save her, risk his life yet again to save her. She had to stop him before it became too late. Kai eyed the spikes as he began to free her hands and feet. He had to do something. He had to stop it. But how? He couldn't face them head on. The moon caught the end at just the right angle. The silver edge shone brighter. They were deadly sharp, so that was out of the option for sure. Julie shook her head. Just leave me. You need to get out of here. She rushed. The panic never left her voice, even as he tugged on the restraints holding her arms back, and her hands were hers again. There's no way I'm leaving you here. You can always come back for me. You need to leave. Now, he had this all planned out. It's been a trap from the moment you walked in here. She rushed, her panic rising by the minute. The spikes were closer now, and if he didn't move, he was going to die. No. He rose to his full height. You can't disarm it. I can and I will. I mean, you shouldn't, she snapped. He wasn't listening, and he needed to. If you disarm it, you'd only succeed in detonating the bomb attached to it. She forced the words out as fast as she could. The very spot you're standing would explode and you'd be, she broke off, her heart not ready to accept what her lips were about to say. You'd be dead, she said. Kai froze at her words. His palms clamped up with sweat as his mind raced a mile a minute. He still had one more rope to go. A rope still held her strapped to the basket. Fuck, he groaned. He had to make a decision quick and right. He could free the last knot and toss Julie to the side, but there'd be little or no time left to save himself. He could just disarm it, but without freeing Julie, she would be in harm's way. There was just one way that could work. He rolled his shoulders back, his decision made. He was not risking her life. He pulled hard on the last knot holding Julie's legs, the restraint breaking loose. He pushed Julie to the side just as quick as he stepped directly in the basket's path. The basket plummeted faster than before, but Kai held his ground and waited. The only way that would work was to disarm it. Julie's eyes glistened with tears as she watched Kai risk his life for her. She cursed herself for being so weak, for being human. Maybe she wouldn't have been so easy to grab if she only had some heightened sense. She would have smelled the drug from a mile away. She would have known not to give him even a second without her being on the run. She would have the speed Kai possessed. She could have been helpful, even in the littlest of ways. Even as she questioned her existence, all she could do was cry and watch. She swiped angrily at the tears. She was only making things worse. Why did she have to be so helpless, so out of touch with what true strength really was, with what Kai needed in a Luna, if he made it out alive? No, he would. He had to. Her heart sunk as the basket came barely an arm length from Kai's face. Her hand flew to her mouth as a gasp escaped her throat. She needed to do something, anything, but what? What could she do? Her hands balled into fist as it dawned on her once again that she could do absolutely nothing but hope he is unharmed after everything. She searched the room for anything she could use. She had no idea what she was looking for, but she had to do something. Anything. She had to help him like he would her. He had come all the way, alone, to make sure she didn't die alone, despite how she'd done nothing but ignore him for weeks, despite the secret she had kept from him. Fine, he had no idea about any of it, but still, she had done it. He'd basically found out she'd been hiding a baby from him, a baby that wasn't his, a baby that supposedly belonged to the man responsible for the situation they were in. She had to do something. She couldn't stomach the thought of Kai not being around to bug her or drag her around with his blank mask on. Her eyes fell on Adrian and her blood boiled as he leaned back, his attention focused on Kai's struggle, the malice clear as day in his eyes. He grinned from ear to ear as he watched Kai's gaze swept from Julie to the basket and back to Julie. The idea of Kai blown to pieces has his smile widening and shining even brighter. All he had to do was watch and wait, and he'd have what he'd waited weeks to achieve, what he even gone as far as forging an alliance with that blasted Dan for. It was all going to be worth it in only a moment. Kai took a step to the right, and the basket stood just an inch from his face. A sound rang out, and the same trinket sound rang in the air once again. A red light appeared on the basket, and the sound of something clicking into place soon followed. His heart raced as he realized what that meant. The device had been activated. It wasn't too far off anymore. He dug his nails into his palm. The sweat made it hard to dig in, but he couldn't leave not. It was too late. The spikes dropped to the ground. Kai jumped out of the way just in time to miss being hit on the head by one. A row of spikes formed, and soon Kai found himself caught between two sharp edges of spikes. He released a breath. His eyes widened in alarm as a small device shot through from the basket. He had to do it. It was the only way. Without thinking for longer than a second, Kai lunged forward for the device. He grabbed it just in time, barely missing the threatening edges of 5 spikes as he leaned on his side to grab onto the device. He knew out of breath as the device ticked between his fingers. Without knowing what he was delving into, going in with nothing more than a vague idea about how bombs generally worked, having no clue what specific type he was working with, Kai behind twisting wires. Sweat dripped down his temple as he struggled for the next line of action. He had no idea if he was even on the right path, or if he was only messing things up even more, but it was better than nothing. It was better than sitting idle while everything went to shit. He could feel Adrian's gaze on his back. Sure, the bastard would be more than happy with the turn of things. His hands shook as he grabbed yet another green wire and placed it behind the first. He swiped at his temple as he held a wire by the edge and replaced it with a red one. He slammed his eyes shut as a dizzy spell struck. The effect of having rejected everything, plant or meat, brought his way for the past few days took a toll on him. Everything seemed to stop as he thought back to everything his training officer had taught him about bombs. He was in a little bubble of his own, a little world he hadn't even built himself, and he only had one task, one difficult task: disarm the bomb, and his little bubble would be no more than a pile of rubbles. He huffed as the wire snugged out of place barely 1 second after he'd placed it carefully in what he could only hope was the right place. His head snapped up just as the basket was about to hit the spikes around him. He snapped the last wire, a black one, out of place, and shoved it behind a blue one just in time. The device made a whistling-like sizzle just before the red light disappeared. A green light soon appeared where the red had previously been. Kai sighed in relief. He'd been successful. He had successfully shut down the device. Just as his shoulders sagged and his eyes swagged back to Julie, to be certain he had not wasted his time and she was actually safe, a sound rang loud enough to make him grab his ears. The light from the explosion soon followed afterwards. The ground rumbled beneath his feet as his eyes went wild. "Julie?" Julie lifted her arms, surprised she was still breathing. Belle played loud music in her ears, but she was just happy to be alive. Was she alive? Or maybe she'd died and woken up in the afterlife of her own mind's making, one that held her last moments. Her head jerked up as she felt fur rub against her skin. Her attention snapped to the arms around her, not human arms, arms covered in fur, arms that ended in claws and not fingers, werewolf arms, Kai's arms. She looked up at her captor. His eyes were much different from his human form, but for some reason she felt like she'd known him for years, like she'd seen that side of him more times than she could remember. She leaned into him, her heart relieved that he was still alive. She knew they weren't out of danger's grip totally yet. From the corner of her eyes she could see the cracked walls, the patio where Kai and Adrian had been exchanging words, where Kai had knelt before Adrian. It laid in rumbles, but it was not totally obscure that she could not recognize it. They were still in danger. She should be scared, worried, or at the very least alert, but she felt safe, safer than if she were safely in her room, cozied up between sheets. Even with the singed fur, she could feel the power radiate off of him. She knew he was nothing but raw strength and knew she had nothing to be scared about. She could feel its steady breath against her chest, and it was soothing. Surprising? Yes, especially considering what had just happened, but it was relaxing to know she could trust his power as much as he did himself. He was fully in control. "We need to get out of here now." A voice rushed, their voice commanding and resolute. She knew that voice. Her jaw dropped, but she wasn't totally surprised to see Ada stood behind Kai's wide embrace. "How did?" Julie began to ask but trailed off, unsure what she needed to actually ask. "I followed your knight in shining armor here." She shrugged. "I had a feeling he would pull something unusual when I found out he'd been in contact with my fa." she coughed. In contact with other tribes. Julie nodded. But why? She asked, genuinely curious. Kai's appearance she could make excuse for, but his willingness to risk his life, she did not understand. And suddenly there was Ada sneaking behind Kai just to be able to help if the need arose. None of it made sense. What could they all want? Do you really think we have the time for those kind of questions now? She arched a brow at her, but her eyes searched the vicinity for any signs of Adrian or movement of any sorts. Julie shook her head. No, definitely not. She agreed. We need to leave now. Ada's attention shifted to Kai, who unwrapped his arms from Julie. Yes, we do. Any idea where the little twat is? Kai deep rumbled, shocked Julie. The wolves could talk too? Her head snapped in his direction. She sighed when her eyes fell on Kai. I'm his usual human form. He looked pretty beaten up, his lip was busted, his forearm spotted a cut that dropped blood every 5 seconds, and his legs looked normal, but as they began to walk, he did more limping than actual walking. You're welcome, by the way. Ada smiled as she grabbed onto the Kai's other arm to support his weight on her. Julie held his other arm, but if she was being honest, Ada did most of the work. But it's the thought that counts, yeah? Thank you. Julie smiled back, unsure what exactly she was thanking her for, but it felt rude not to, considering she had Coke all the way when she didn't need to, when she wasn't obligated to, when she had actually been instructed not to. Ada's chuckle was the exact opposite of the atmosphere. Julie's shock was visible as she watched the lady support Kai's weight like it was nothing, while she struggled to move her foot one at a time in front of the other. I know what you're thinking. What did I do? Yeah? She asked. Kai hadn't stopped looking around since they began their escape, which made Julie uneasy. What was he expecting? Well, not much if I'm being honest, she shrugged. The action pulled Kai's shoulders with it. Thankfully, I came just in time. I almost didn't because it seemed like everything was going well. Plus, I had a little distraction. She smiled bashfully as they approached a tree tall enough to tower over all three of them. Kai rolled his eyes as they tucked their way neatly behind the tree. Basically, she changed the positions of the explosives just in time to reduce the impact on us, he grumbled. Julie shrunk back as yet again another wince escaped his lips. She hated to see him in pain, but hated it even more that it was all because of her, all because she'd been stupid enough to get caged by Adrian in the first place. You should have seen the look on your little captor's face. Ada chuckled as she shoved Kai's arm upwards to better place it on her shoulder. Julie snuck a look backwards. She released a breath in relief as she saw the abandoned building a safe distance away. She saw a shadow of a figure, but she looked away before she could overthink it, or worse, whoever that was saw her. She had no idea who it was, but she knew they definitely wouldn't be on their side. Everyone that was already with them. Whoever was left behind was either one of Adrian's men, or worse, Adrian himself, and the last thing she wanted was for him to discover their position and screw everything up. Adrian searched the area. Damn it! He kicked a rock in the opposite direction, angrily. One job, that was it. One freaking job. All you had to do was come for your girl, free her, and freaking die while doing it. Is that too much to ask? He ranted. His anger rose with each words. Stones flew in the air with each angry kick of his foot as he paced the patio of the former abandoned building, the sorry excuse for an infrastructure laid in rumbles around him. No signs of any human or wolf, sir? One of his men, the leader reported, his hands tight behind his back. Adrian dragged on air. He pinched the bridge of his nose as his eyes snapped to the man who had been stupid enough to return with anything but positive news. Everything was going to shit. It was a simple plan. A foolproof one. He'd gotten only the best of the best explosives. He'd been assured they would not fail, that they never had. And he'd heard the rumors about the basket too. That's why he had trusted the stupid inventor, why he had no doubt when he had installed it, when he had planned Julie's capture. He'd been so sure the plan was foolproof. No one escaped the basket. His foot halted mid-kick as his eyes sighted movement. He stopped, his eyes focused on the spot. His heightened vision tapped into the energy sizzling from his anger. A smirk stretched across his lips as she turned quickly. Julie, quick! They've escaped! Go after them now, and you better not lose them this time or don't bother showing up back here, he snapped. Check that group of trees first, he commanded and pointed towards the spot he'd sighted Julie in. Yes, sir, they called in unison just before they marched out. Ada's head snapped backwards at the sound of footsteps. Shit, we need to hurry. She rushed and pulled Kai faster, totally forgetting Julie held his other arm. Kai craned his neck backwards and instantly cursed himself for not being stronger to not weigh them both back. They would have been home free if they didn't have to carry him all the way. Julie focused forwards. She couldn't help but feel it was her fault yet again. Why had she stared at their destination? Why did she feel the need to be sure it had been a human out on the patio? How are they moving so damn fast? She grumbled under her breath. Shit, shit, shit! They're really close. Ada yelled as she took a second glance backwards. How did they even find us? She sped up, moving impossibly fast. Kai slammed his eyes shut as pain rammed through him the faster Ada went. They were moving too fast, but he wasn't going to slow them even more than he already had. He swallowed hard and sucked up whatever strength he had left in him as they moved deeper into the forest. That ledge, we need to hide behind that ledge. He forced through gritted as he pushed down on Ada's shoulder for support. Ada led Kai to the ledge and Julie couldn't help but look behind her as they approached. They all slipped behind the ledge just in time to miss the men walk by. They held their breath. Being caught was as good as death at that point. Kai leaned against the ledge, his head lifted as pain coursed through him, every muscle in his. He fought the urge to scream as the men crossed through the area. Immediately they were out of earshot. Ada said, We need to leave now. If not, we'd never be leaving. And who's going to save us? Kai and Julie nodded in response and followed her release. There! I see them! A loud voice called from where Adrian's henchmen were. Julie yelped as they began running. The men weren't too far behind. Kai, I know it hurts, but I need you to push a little harder. My shoulder's weakening, and we need to run to make it out of here alive. Ada pleaded, her eyes held an apology. Anyone with eyes knew Kai was in obvious pain, even though he refused to show weakness. Kai nodded and thrust one foot in front of the other as Ada led them. They ran faster than they should. The threat looked just behind them, waiting for their slip-up, for a single mistake to strike. Kai groaned as his already blooding leg slammed against a stone, a sting-looking one. Shit, sorry, Ada whispered. We need to keep going, they're very close. She rushed, panicked. I can't, Kai grumbled. What do you mean you can't? Think about the aftermath. We can always meet a healer, but right now we need to run, and never look back, run as fast as our legs would take us. Well, isn't that the speech of the year? A deep voice called from just behind them, a painfully familiar one. Kai's back stiffened, Julie shook. Ada said, Fuck my life. Kai claws shot out before Julie could even blink. He shoved Julie behind him so quickly she had to hold on to his bulking arm for balance. She watched as his sleek arm hair gave way to white, soft fur, the same fur that had cradled her, same fur she cozied up to after the explosion. She looked into the wolf's eyes, and just like before, they were a different color, darker, dangerous. They had a hint of red to them, and Julie could guess where his head was at. Revenge. A burst of hair sprang out, and Kai's wolf revealed itself. Julie rushed to the ledge from before. She knew better than to get involved in a fight between werewolves, at least not without a weapon. Her heart raced as she watched Kai react so quickly to Adrian. One moment he was bruised and barely able to walk without help, and the next, he was bursting with barely contained energy. She worried for his opponent, not with the way he fumed at the nose like a raging bull. She let out a shaky breath as she forced herself to remember it was just Kai. It was still Kai. The wolf was still the wolf that had rescued her from a massive explosion, and at that moment, he was saving her from Adrian and his men. Ada and Kai were. Her eyes fell on Ada and widened in shock as she saw her wolf for the first time. Unlike Kai's, which was a majestic white, her wolf was a towering gray breed. Its claws resembled a vulture's, but it was very distinguishable from that. The fur gel sleekly down her forelegs and hind legs, getting thicker towards the tail. Her eyes were golden, with black like slits in between them. She looked way different from Kai's wolf, but she looked just as threatening, just as ready to rip flesh apart, Adrian's flesh. She stumbled as her heel kick against a stone in her path. She bit back her cry. Others were risking their lives so they could all get out. The least she could do was not draw any more attention to herself, at least till it's all over. Another burst of flesh pulled Julie's attention back to the group of men Kai and Ada faced. Adrian's claw burst out, a black shade which reflected against the moon. His fur was similar to Kai in direction and texture, but the color was a dirty brown, just like his freaking personality, Julie thought. One moment she was staring at a group of wolves growling at each other, their sharp teeth bared at their opponent, their eyes dangerous colors. Julie was amazed, freaking out, curious to see what it would lead to, but most of all she was scared. Scared for Ada, and dreadfully scared for Kai. Her eyes locked with his, a mix of red and black. She nodded. Her head had barely come down when he lunged with so much force. Adrian staggered back at the sheer strength in the shove. Adrian snarled in response, his teeth bared at Kai. Kai returned the gesture full on as he circled Adrian, a slow, daring walk. Adrian took the call and lunged forward. His teeth snapped at Kai's leg. Kai let out a short but loud howl just before the snap of jaw-breaking teeth rang in the air. He pulled his head back, and in his teeth were fur, dirty brown fur. Adrian's side laid exposed. Kai spat out the fur. Adrian growled as it hit him square in the face. They danced around each other, each dared the other to move closer. Adrian, always the impatient one, took the bite and jumped forward. His claws jutted out just before a swipe. Kai's howl rang louder as the claw trails marred the skin beneath his fur. Adrian shoved them at Kai. The tiny specks of hair fell freely from his face, down to his feet. Kai snapped his teeth at Adrian. The other wolf returned the favor. It was the last Julie saw of them. A ray of colors flashed as both wolves collided, butting into each other, swiping at body parts, shoving at the other. It was fast, it was fierce, it was heart-wrenching to watch. Julie shut her eyes a few times only to peel those fingers whenever she heard a loud crash or a thud, or the snap of claws or the baring of teeth. She couldn't help it. She did it so often, she might as well have seen the entire thing. Julie ducked quickly, barely missing the fistful of hair chucked her way by one of Adrian's men. She remained still, her heart racing as she hoped he hadn't seen her. She counted. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. She snuck a peek and let out a breath in pure relief. The wolf had his back to her. Ada's fur heaved up and down. Her fur spotted a few scratches, but her eyes still looked hungry as she stared down one of Adrian's wolves. The black wolf lunged at her. She ducked to the side just in time. The wolf crashed to the floor. The impact created a dent in the grass and released a thud into the air. Ada shoved the other wolf, a black wolf as well. But unlike the first, which had yellow eyes, he spotted a pair of green eyes, just like emeralds. Ada jumped to the left, then the right, swerved quickly to the left, slid beneath the green eyes wolf, just before it's tossed in the air. Her head cranes upwards as she broke into a howl. The yellow-eyed wolf charged at her, gripping flesh. Ada let out a cry as its sharp teeth dug into her skin and ripped fur. The green-eyed wolf quickly joined it, his teeth locked over her hind leg. Julie winced as Ada let out another cry. She rose to help, but immediately halted. What exactly was she going to do? Beg them to free her friend? They'd probably rip her flesh apart before she even so much as got a word out. She bit her lip as she held her position, secretly hoping that by some magic she succeeds in freeing herself. Her head wound and circled back. Her teeth snapped at the wolf, grabbing onto her leg. It jerked back, but its teeth stayed tied to Ada's leg. Her head reared forward so fast, Julie almost missed it. The sound rang loud enough for all to pause. Her teeth dug unwavering into its neck. Its yellow eyes spread out in shock, only to dim slowly as the seconds ticked by. Ada pulled her head back and flesh followed. Blood pooled out from the spot on its neck, fast and full. The wolf turned to her just before it hit the floor, dead. The green-eyed wolf howled, a gut-wrenching sound amongst the chaos. Adrian's head snapped in the direction. He charged for Ada, who shoved the green-eyed wolf to the side. His teeth bared, his eyes ever darker, he snarled just before he jumped. Kai immediately swung into action. He matched his leap and shoved his aside mid-air. Adrian crashed into a rock and tumbled a few more times till he finally crashed at the ledger. Julie ducked behind it. The last thing she wanted was a werewolf version of Adrian on her. Adrian snarled at Kai and lunged for him, ready to pounce. Kai ducked just in time, swiped a claw in the air just before Adrian met the floor. A whine escaped his lips as blood oozed from the spot Kai had nicked. Adrian's eyes flared. His claws scraped against the dry ground, sending pebbles flying as swung his foot. He raced forward, his target Kai's foreleg, ready to give a damning blow. He swung his head like he'd been going for the foreleg. Kai moved away from his teeth only to leave his neck exposed. Adrian didn't waste any time. His mouth opened up for the finishing bite. No, no, no. She wanted to do something. Kai, please move. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't. Not if she could be making things worse. A loud wailing howl rang in the air, which sent chills down Julie's spine. Adrian's neck snapped in the direction of the sound. The green-eyed wolf looked at its leader moments before it hit the floor with a loud thud. Julie took the opportunity. She finally had the chance to prove she wasn't absolutely useless and could always help out. Taking advantage of his distraction, she grabbed a nearby iron pipe. Her grip around the pipe tightened as she crouched closer. Her heart raced in her chest as she neared the heat of it all. Without thinking, she swung and landed as hard as she could. Another wail rang out, louder than before. Adrian stumbled backwards, the ringing in his head louder than the crippling pain he felt. Kai snapped out of the daze and charged. While Adrian still struggled to gain his bearing, he snapped his teeth hard against the flesh of his underbelly. An ear-piercing sound rang loud as he twirled in circles, the wound visible for anyone to see. They immediately took the chance and raced into the forest. Julie panted as she struggled to keep up with their pace. The air thinned around her with every 3 steps she took to match their every step. Her head suddenly felt heavy, her eyes dizzy. She needed to stop, or she might just pass out right there on the forest floor. Their legs thumped forward majestically. If she wasn't so breathless, she would have taken a moment to admire the sheer beauty of their fur whipping in the air as they ran. But she felt like she was actually going to die at any moment. Suddenly, Kai stopped. She rushed to catch up with him, grateful he had at least slowed down for her. She shrieked as Kai ducked between her legs and shoved her upwards and onto his back. She grabbed tightly onto his neck, scared she might slip if she didn't hold on for dear life. She yelled as he swung forwards. Tears gathered in her eyes as the wind whipped through her face. It felt like she was on a speed bike. The feeling was exhilarating to say the least. She laughed at no one and nothing in particular as they sped through the forest and out of it. Julie released a breath as they burst out into the highway. For a moment, she actually thought they were lost when they kept whipping from tree truck to tree truck. She yelled in protest as the cut through the highway and tailed the side on it instead, within the safe coverage of the forest trees. The trees were perfect for it. She understood why they hadn't used the highway. Of course, she would scream till her throat was destroyed if she suddenly saw 2 werewolves and a girl walking around. Julie blew out a breath as the familiar gates came into view. She really was free. She hadn't actually processed everything or accepted that she was free until that moment, until she stared at the gate into Kai's home, until they made their way up the stairs to Kai's home, their shared home. As soon as they crossed the gate, the fur and the claws were gone, almost like they'd never been there, like she'd imagined it. If they weren't spotting the same injuries in the same areas they'd gotten it like in the fight, she would have concluded that maybe she did, but the marks were there, and she had seen the fight. Julie smiled, glad that they were in the clear. Thank you. She had barely finished when Kai grew limp just before he collapsed on her. Oh my God, Kai! Julie yelled, the shock in her voice palpable as she struggled to keep him from the floor. Let me help, Ada offered. She grabbed the Kai by his right arm. Ada pulled out her car keys from her pant pockets. She clicked a button, and the sound rang clear from the garage. Quick, help me get the car. I can hold him up, she instructed. Julie collected the keys with shaky hands. She couldn't help it. Kai fainted. Kai, the unshakable force in her life, the man that had shielded her from explosives and still fought his kind to get her to safety, fainted. She felt dizzy as she ran to Ada's car parked neatly between two of Kai's cars. She pulled the door open and without ceremony, started the car and rolled it forward. "Quick, get it!" she yelled as the doors slid open. Ada struggled, but she eventually succeeded in getting Kai into the back seat. She huffed, breathless from the task. She slammed the door shut and slid into the passenger side of the car. Julie hit the accelerator and they sped into the highway looking a mess, but priorities. Julie clenched and unclenched the steering wheel the entire ride to the hospital. It was on the other side of town, but unlike Ada's company, it was on the good side of town, the part saved for the elite of the elite. "Turn left here," Ada instructed. Julie did as she was told without question. Her mind moved at a mile a minute. She kept her eyes on the road as best as she could, but couldn't help but check the back to make sure he was still breathing, make sure she still saw his chest heaving up and down so gently, it was almost unnoticeable. "Right here. It should be the third building on the right." Ada pointed at the street in question. Julie hit the accelerator again. The car jerked forward, and her eyes shot backwards to make sure he was okay. Julie rolled the car into a stop at the hospital's parking lot. She rushed out of the car. Ada quickly followed suit. Ada grabbed onto his upper body, pulled him out by it, and Julie soon joined in and held his legs. With the help of each other, they succeeded in carrying him to the door, where they're immediately aided by the hospital staff. A trolley is brought out and Kai is rolled in with both women on his tail. They followed the rollable bed into room 6, where they're asked to wait outside by a registered nurse. "But he's with us or we're with him. We just want to make sure he's okay." Julie ranted, her nerves leaking though as she pleased with her eyes to be allowed to be by his side. "I understand that perfectly, ma'am, but it's part of our rules here to maintain order. The doctors require that to work properly," she explained, her eyes apologetic. "But..." Julie started to argue but stopped when Ada placed a hand on her shoulder. "Julie, you need to relax. Let them do their jobs," she whispered. She couldn't say she totally understood what she felt, but she knew how it felt to want a loved one to be all right so bad, to suddenly have to wait on a stranger to tell you the fate of someone you've known all your life. "You could have a seat here, though, but don't worry, everything would be fine," she assured. "Thank you so much," Ada said as a shaky Zuki just stared at the wall. They took their seat. Julie tapped her feet against the floor. Her nerves wreaked havoc against her insides. She knew he wasn't at the top of his game when he could barely walk, but after the incident with Adrian and his henchmen, she had concluded that he was perfectly fine. He was not fine. Her eyes, head, and full attention snapped to the door as it seeing open. "How is he? Is he doing okay?" She rushed, her hand itching to grab the woman's arm and demand answers. The nurse looked at her confused and just walked away without an explanation. She peeked back, the creeped-out look still on her face, but she kept her opinion to herself. The door swung open again, and Julie anxiously awaited it. A middle-aged man who looked to be 35 appeared with a lab coat dangling from his body and a stethoscope from his neck. "Okay, it says here that he's married. Either one of you the spouse in question here?" he asked. His eyes left the card and shuffled between Julie and Ada. Julie looked to Ada for about 2 seconds before she spoke. I'm his wife. Is he okay?" She rushed, her worried already at the top of the scale. "May I see you in my office?" Her heart raced as she looked to Ada. What was she to expect? She knew it was routine, but still, what if he had seen something strange and decided to ask? What was she to do then? Ada nodded, and she smiled at her and whispered a thank you, just before she went away with the doctor. She followed quietly behind him. The only sound she made was the sound of her fingers tapping anxiously against the fabric of whatever was left of her dress. "Please, have a seat." The man gestured to the chair just across from him. "For real, is he okay? What's the situation of things, doctor?" She rushed. Anything could have happened in that room. He could have responded to their treatment, but he was a human doctor. They had their limit. They didn't know much about werewolf wound. What if Adrian had somehow poisoned him with a werewolf poison? No human would know what to do about that. Should they have gone to the tribe doctor? Were they wasting their time with this doctor, or was it already too late? and their mistake was going to cost Kai his life? Yes, we were able to salvage the situation, but he suffered some extensive burns and severe blood loss. He informed, "Was it a gas explosion or am I missing something? You weren't home." The doctor, his eyes weren't suspicious, more curious than anything, but it had Julie rolling her back and tensing her shoulders. Julie released a shaky breath in relief. She couldn't shake the thought of her director and wonder how she had been or what she had been doing when they found out. Now she understood why her friend had been so out of it when they spoke about the direction. It was all she could do not to pull out what was left of her hair. "I'm actually quite surprised someone with such extreme injuries recovered within a day," he thought aloud. Julie smiled. "Yeah, we get that a lot." She forced one hand over the other to stop the shaking. Was she supposed to tell his doctor that he was a werewolf and have him freak out and bail on the treatment? Hell no. As regards your question, it was more of a workplace breakout. Thankfully, he wasn't too close to the main point of impact at the time, so there was no cause for alarm then. But then he fainted, and... Julie slammed her eyes shut as the possibilities ran through her mind for the umpteenth time since Ada lifted Kai into the car. "Doctor, is he really okay?" she asked again, trying to hold back the tears, but barely succeeding. She had basically lied to the doctor through her teeth, but her worries, she could only wish they were lied. She couldn't picture having to go back to that house without him making one snarky comment at her or the other. The doctor smiled at her. "He will be, Mrs. He will be," he assured. She returned the man's smile as he watched her, expecting more, but she wasn't giving him any more information than she already had, especially not that one. The doctor released a heavy breath before he said, "Like I said before, he's perfectly fine. In fact, he healed faster than most patients I've seen. Which is good because he would need surgery to eliminate the dead skin, so his nature, that is his natural skin, can begin to rebuild new cells and replace the damaged and now dead ones." Her explained with so much patience, Julie almost believed they had all the time in the world to talk about their plans, and Kai wasn't on the edge of danger because of her. Juliet thought about it for a moment. And how long would it take? How long would he need to recover? She asked, her mind already quite far from the present. The doctor's face scrunched up for a moment before he said, "Well, we could begin now, if you give us the consent to, and the procedure is followed, starting with the consent, then payment, then preparation, and finally the procedure itself." He explained, his eyes never left hers as he did so. Julie knew he was just doing his job, just trying his best to be as calm and as patient as he could be for his patients and their relatives. But his calm unnerved her. Julie shuffled in her seat, she intertwined her finger, laced them together till they stopped shaking and asked, "And the recovery?" The doctor pinched the bridge of his nose again. Usually it would take about 2 weeks to a month, depending on each individual. But for him, given how quickly he seems to heal, I wouldn't be surprised if he recovered a day after, or more surprisingly, immediately after the procedure. The doctor explained. She knew what he was seeking, what he rummaged around for with this lightly thrown pointers at the fact that Kai healed faster than others. He did not believe her. She couldn't blame him. Even she herself would have asked more questions, especially when all she got the first was, "Yeah, we get that a lot." But all of that was his problem, not hers. All she cared about was Kai's recovery, and only that mattered to her. "Please do whatever it takes to doctor. I just want to see him alive and well again, well enough to stand on his own 2 feet." She told him, her eyes pleaded with him to do his absolute best and leave the damn healing thing on the side so he could focus on what he needed to do, and only that. The doctor nodded. He pulled out a paper from his desk drawer, wrote a few things on it, and handed it to Julie. Julie grabbed the slim sheet of paper and read through. It was a consent form, a detailed one. She glanced through it briefly before she requested for a pen. The doctor handed her his, and she signed. "You could make a part payment at the bursary while we make the preparation for the procedure," he told her. Julie nodded, thanked him, and left. The next few hours were torturous as she sat with Ada beside the waiting section of the operating room. Nurses on scrubs came in and out of it like a war was coming, and they were gathering supplies. After a few more hours of pure torture and her heart threatening to give up on her, the doctor appeared from the room, also on scrubs and some rubbery white boots. Julie noted a lick of blood at the toe section of his boot, and her heart rate shot up as she waited for his response, for the results of everything they'd done for the past few hours. He was going to tell her if all her waiting had been in vain or not, if she had successfully caused Kai's death or not. The doctor's face broke out into a smile before he said, "Mrs. Julie, congrats. It was an absolute success, and he's currently already in the healing stage. It would seem I wasn't totally wrong that his healing would kick in almost immediately." He laughed, and for the first time since she walked through the doors of the hospital, Julie returned his gestures truthfully. She clamped her hand over her mouth as she breathed a sigh of relief, her eyes teary with joy. Kai was out of danger. She felt utterly grateful to the doctor for not coming out with something like there were complications, or it might take longer than they anticipated. "Thank you so much," she found herself saying, though the chokehold of tears that threatened to spill. "Thank you so much, doctor," she repeated, elated. "Can we see him?" she asked almost immediately. "You're welcome, and sure you can, but you'd have to wait for cleanup finish up inside, and he would be rolled back to his room. You can see him then, no issues," the doctor explained. Julie nodded, just excited to hear Kai was in the clear again. Kai's eyes fluttered open. He winced as an ache ran through his mind. The room was quiet, save for the beeping noises close by. He turned to the machine, surprised when he saw the ticking lines. The room was a painful white, the glare harsh against his eyes as sun streaked in from the open curtains through the too many windows. He groaned as he shoved a hand in his face, instantly regretting it when pain shot from the spot on his hand. His breathing came out as puff of air as it dawned on him. He didn't have so many windows in his room, just the one. His bed was much larger. "Where am I?" He called out to no one in particular. Sorry, I thought the light might help," a voice hurriedly said from beside him. He turned to see Julie on a chair beside his bed. His shoulders sagged, his breathing returned to normal as he watched her rush to the window directly above his bed and shoved a curtain over it. "Sorry," she whispered, her eyes apologetic. She didn't have the clothes she had last been on the last time they spoke, but she looked just as exhausted, as scared as she had been that night. She dipped into the chair and pulled it closer to him, the movement surprisingly quiet considering the floor were tiled to the very last bit of space. "Sorry, I thought that would help," she apologized again. He found it funny that she was the one apologizing, considering the last thing he could remember was him feeling so horrible and out of sorts that he'd had to leave the burden of all his weight on her. "Why do you look stressed?" he asked instead, his eyes never left her face. He noted the eye bags heavy enough to hold his head, the bloodshot eyes, the number of times she leaned forwards forgetting all about her need for proper posture. She was exhausted. But why? Her cheeks stained red. She shoved her hair down suddenly, and he smirked as he watched her fidget and try to hide her blush, but failing. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could get a word out, a nurse walked in with a tray. They both remained silent for a while and just watched while the young lady skillfully poked the drip bag with a syringe containing a yellow fluid. Moments later, he could feel his body relax against his will. His eyes dimmed. The last thing he saw was Juki reaching for his hair before his eyes closed, and he fell into a deep sleep. Kai's eyes snapped open. He relaxed when he didn't feel the ache he had earlier, nor the harsh glare from the sun. Had it been a dream? Was he in a different rooms? Everything looked exactly the same, but the curtains were different, a much darker shade, almost black. He looked around the room for Julie, surprised when he found her lying beside him on the average-sized bed. His heart warmed at the sight. His smile stretched wider when he noted her clothes. It hadn't been a dream. He turned to his side as he watched her lips part and close as she snores lightly, blissfully unaware of his gaze. He had to admit, somewhere along the line, he had fallen in love with the human girl. He stroked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. He would always protect her, not matter the cost, even if the cost was its life itself, He would protect her from anything and anyone that would want to even inflict so much as a scratch on her smooth skin. His fingers ran slowly down her cheek as he wondered how he had gotten so lucky as to have gotten someone like her care so much for him. His hands stilled as she stirred in her sleep. She let out the cutest yawn possible as she stretched. Her eyes fluttered open next, and he was starstruck yet again with just how beautiful she was without even trying. Her reaction is much slower than his as her eyes settled on his. "You're awake," she said through yet another yawn. Kai chuckled, the deep rumble music to her ears. She scooted closer, her eyes watched his for protest. Instead, he stretched out his hands wide, a soft smile on his lips. She moved even closer, and before she could close the distance, he did. He pulled her into his arm, a laugh escaped his lips as she yelped. She felt soft against his skin. Her smile warmed his body as she looked up at him, the joy behind them causing them to sparkle. Suddenly it all felt worth it. The stress, the pain, the anger, the tearing of his flesh. It all felt worth it. The stress of the entire night eased up as she cuddled closer, her tiny arms wrapped around his waist. She sighed, and he swore he had never felt so much for someone since his last mate. She trusted him, found comfort in his embrace. Kai tilted her chin up and covered her lips with his in a gentle kiss. Julie sighed, the sound one of content. Kai turned fully to his side. His body faced hers properly as he deepened the kiss. He poured everything into that one kiss, every fear he'd felt since her disappearance, the pain that threatened to take with it his will to life when the spikes had jutted out so close to her, when he had thought all hope was surely and truly lost, just before the explosives went off, how he had thought he would never see her again, never hold her again. He pulled her closer as he grabbed her by the neck. Julie moaned, making him go crazy, but he let his hand slip into her hair instead. He refused to rush anything with her anymore. He refused to hide behind his fears of losing her again. He was going to savor every moment he got to spend with her, enjoy it like it was the last. Julie moved closer to him. Her body hummed with life as Kai took his time. It was unlike any of their other kisses, which were mostly fast and hungry. It was slow, passionate, and filled with their shared need for one another. Julie got on her knees. A chuckle rumbled through his chest as he laid on his back. Julie straddled him, her head dipped. He licked his bottom lip as she paused and hovered over his lips, her breath coming out in pants. Sorry to interrupt." Both their heads snapped in the direction of the sound. Julie scurried off of him like he was on fire. Kai couldn't help it. He burst into laughter as her cheeks became impossibly red. She'd gone from a vixen to a shy cat in a millisecond. But she was his shy cat. He pulled her to his side, not letting her flee the bed. He placed a quick kiss on her forehead and turned to the doctor. The doctor had a kind smile on his face, an understanding smile. He didn't say anything else, just did a quick run-through of Kai's vitals, a quick examination of the incision site for spilt stitching or signs of possible infection or too slow a recovery. His eyes widened in shock as they settled on where surgical site was supposed to be. That's impossible!" His eyes snapped to Kai. A mix of amazement, curiosity, fear, and shock swirled in them. "What's going on?" he asked. You're the doctor, you tell me. What is going on?" Kai arched a brow at him. "I've never seen anything like it in my entire profession," the doctor yelled, amazed. He took a glance at the site again. "Can you turn on the other side?" he requested. Kai did as he was told and turned to the side, revealing his back to the doctor. The doctor trailed off. His eyes fell on Julie, who was a trembling mess, a stark contrast to Kai's calm and composed aura. "There were scars, really severe scars on your back just last night, and the surgical site." The doctor looked between both of them, his eyes as wide as saucers as he tried to process what could have happened. "They seem to have disappeared overnight," he yelled against. Alarmed that if he kept going, he might draw the attention of others in the hospital, she hurriedly said, "That's perfectly normal. He just heals super fast, had always done so right from birth." She tried for a mix of the truth without giving too much details. "Not this fast. No one has ever healed this fast, especially not after a third-degree burn that's severe," he countered. His eyes watched Kai like he was some alien or strange being dropped from the sky. What could this mean? His eyes moved to Julie. Julie squirmed under his gaze. What could she say? She couldn't tell him the truth. But what else could she possibly say that would actually explain Kai's super healing ability? Even as she had given her previous explanations, Mom of it made sense to her, but she had tried either ways and he had countered everything word for word. He had only ended up with more questions for her, questions that unneeded her, questions that got more intrusive with each round. Faced with his insistent questions, Julie was at a loss for words. She was just about to blurt out whatever came to her head first, no matter how stupid or absurd it sounded. She was just going to have to do it and get it over with, so he could leave before he got too close to the actual truth. "Doctor, you seem to be making my wife a bit uncomfortable with your intrusive questions," Kai drawled. The doctor's eyes widened like he had only just realized he was doing so. But, he stuttered, confused but still very curious as to what could have resulted in such an ability. Was it his skin's regenerative ability, or was he on some pill yet to be announced to the public? He looked rich enough to be part of the elite of society. It wasn't impossible. But he had worked on even presidents, and none had come with such an ability to heal so quickly. "Is it a behind-closed-door pull?" he blurted. "Doctor, I would not like to have to repeat myself," Kai warned. "I thank you for your services, and because I'm extremely grateful for such an excellent service, I would have my friend, the General Secretary to the President, endorse your hospital with a lot of merit, and I would personally make donations to the hospital as well. A place as good and up to par as this deserves the recognition and should be encouraged, don't you think?" He turned to Julie. She nodded in agreement, finally realizing where Kai was going with his promise. "What I enjoyed the most with your service was the digression, and I hope we can maintain that." His eyes lifted to the doctor. His eyes asked the question, his lips weren't. The doctor looked between them, his eyes suddenly a bit suspicious, but still, he couldn't deny what the benefits would do for the swiftness of their operation at the hospital. And it wasn't like he was asking for anything against his Hippocrates oath. If anything, it was along the lines of it. Patient's privacy was a priority. He nodded. "I'm glad you enjoyed our service." He smiled. "Ma'am, you could go to the bursary to process his discharge while I take care of these." He gestured towards the line in his hand. Julie nodded, jumped off the bed and left the room with just her purse. Julie quickly signed off on the discharge form and waited. She smiled as Kai's face came into view. He was walking on his own, almost like he hadn't almost died just the previous day. He reached for her, and she laced her hand with his as they walked out of the hospital. The moment the door slammed close, Kai pulled her to him. "Hey!" she yelled, but she chuckled as he placed a kiss on her lip. Another quick kiss, then another, and another till he was bathing her in kisses. Julie grabbed his face, rose to her tiptoes, and slammed her lips on his in a needy kiss. Her body hummed to life as he returned his. His hand wrapped around her waist, the other slipped behind her neck and around as he deepened the kiss. She let out the sexiest moan he had ever heard and slammed her back against the door, gentle enough not to hurt her. His hand on her waist slipped onto the door just beside her head. The other gripped her neck and gilded her head upwards. She whimpered. Her hand swept up his hair as her body burned with need. She thrust her hips upward as he moved even closer. Her body reveled in the heat oozing off of him. His scent invaded her senses, a mix of wood, spice, and something light, something citrusy. She tilted her head back as his lips slipped from her lips to her cheeks and down her neck. "Kai!" she moaned. Kai's eyes flared a shiny black. A groan tore from his throat as he dipped his head. He trailed peppery kisses down her neck. "Fuck, you make me so crazy. How?" He whispered into her ear and nibbled on it before he slammed his lips back on hers. She let out a loud moan when he bit on her bottom lip. She let him in. With the way her body burned, she would let him do anything he wanted. She needed him. Kai swerved around, his muscles ripped against her as he raced towards the bedroom. He kicked the door open and threw her on the bed. Julie chuckled. Her eyes trailed from his messy hair to his hungry eyes and down his strong, muscular body. He shoved his shirt to the side, his biceps rippled with the movement. "Damn, you're so freaking hot," she purred. Her hands teased the fabric of her blouse. slipped to her collarbone and lower till she could feel her breath come out in pants. She needed him before she went mad. A deep rumble escaped him as he ducked onto the bed, painstakingly slow like a predator would its prey. She had barely adjusted to his arms, caging her, when she heard the buttons snap apart as he ripped her blouse straight through the middle. "Not even as hot as you are," he groaned into her neck. "Oh, shut up," she laughed. "Now enough talky." The words died in her throat. Kai. It was the side of her he had seen that night that had him stuck, made him crave more, made him chase not expecting to, but eventually fell in love. She was at the edge of a release. She was carefree and she was beautiful. Julie lifted her head as her breathing slowed to see Kai's expression, only to be pulled tighter into a warm embrace. Kai lifted Julie's chin with a finger. His head dipped as he leaned in to kiss her. Her lips felt soft and warm against his. He leaned closer, his naked body pressed tenderly against hers. Julie couldn't help the smile that spread across her lips. Kai's kiss sent warm tingles through her. Her hands slipped back onto his shoulders as she kissed him right back. She never in a million years could have pictures that her life would end up where it was at that moment. With her in love again, with Kai of all people. Her boss, a man that wasn't even human, a man that was meant to be nothing more than a one-night stand. Her hip grinded against his as he deepened the kiss. It was insane how horny he could make her with just a touch. He chuckled as he bit her lower lip. He groaned into her mouth. The sound vibrated her to her very core. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do this, how much I've wanted you to want me as much as I want you," he confessed. Julie's lips stretched into a smile as she tilted her head back to look at him. How had she gotten so lucky? At least Adrian had been useful for one good thing in her life. He had messed up so another man, a better man, a truthful man, could come into her life and make everything as it should be. "I want you, Julie," he whispered into her lips. Her eyes widened. "Again." Kai chuckled. "And even after that, again and again, till I lost function of my legs," he boasted. Julie chuckled and kissed him back with as much passion as he did. He flipped them over so he was on top. He trailed kisses down her neck. She sighed in relief. Kai grabbed her ass, pushed her hips close to his. The sound of a doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. Kai groaned in frustration and Julie chuckled, crashing into him. "You could just leave them. The weather is just perfect outside today," he suggested, his hold on her waist not loosening. If anything, it got tighter. "Stop," Julie chuckled, but she still leaned into his touch. "See, you don't even want to leave," he teased. Julie's cheeks became red as the blush crept up her neck. "Shut up! It's only because you have knee caged in such a tight hold." She smacked his shoulders. "Is that so?" He arched a brow at her. "Okay, little birdie, you're free to go." He unwound his arms from around her. Julie didn't move an inch. "See, you're free and you don't even want to leave." Kai's chuckle vibrated in her chest. She smiled down at him. She could see herself getting used to the sound of his laugh. "Now, come on, let's give you a little reminder. I think you might have forgotten exactly why we should leave whoever it is out there." "Kai, we can't." She didn't mean to, but she couldn't help it. She burst into laughter the next minute. Kai pinned her on the bed, beneath him. A real smile stretched across his lips as he watched her try and fail to shove him off. "Kai, we can't stay here while someone freezes out there." Julie tried again. "I'm sure they left already. Forget them." He cooed in her ear just before he nibbled on her earlobe. Her eyes fluttered closed as a moan slipped from her lips. Just then, the bell rang once again, interrupting their little moment. Kai groaned and rolled off of her and onto the bed. Julie chuckled as she hurriedly grabbed the first thing she could lay her hands on. She slipped in button after button of a black button-down Kai had hung neatly beside the bed. Kai watched her leave wearing the shirt he had worn to work on the day he discovered she had gone missing. He could get used to it, her being completely and totally his in very way. He sighed in utter satisfaction and content. Julie turned at the sound and sighed at the look of comfort on his face. "I'd be right back before you know it." She called and left the room. She shut the door behind her and crossed the sitting room to find out who it was. She turned when she heard footsteps behind her. She mailed when she saw Kai race to her. She ducked a little too late as he grabbed her from behind. She wiggled her way through and ran towards the door with Kai catching up quickly. She snuck a peek through the eye hole and smiled when she saw Ada stood patiently waiting on the other side. She hurriedly straightened the collar of the shirt, suddenly wishing she'd taken the time to pick something better, less implicating. Kai rolled his eyes. "Just open it already. I'm sure she already knows you can't keep your hands off of me," he smirked. Julie smacked him on the arm just before she swung the door open. Ada glanced between both of them. Julie hid her reddening cheeks behind her hair, but Kai stood confidently behind her, unfazed by her piercing gaze. "I see we've been busy," she teased. Her eyes fell on Julie, a smirk on her face as she crossed the doorway and into the house. "What do you mean?" Julie shrieked, hating how her voice came out more as a shriek than the calm, unfazed tone she was going for. "You know," she grinned. "You know he's still a patient, so you can't be too rough with him now. I think the doctor said it's bad for the wounds." "Ada!" he called, a clear warning in his voice. "Do not underestimate the recovery ability of an alpha," he warned, trying to maintain a straight face. He chuckled the next moment at the sight of Julie's blush. "Anyways, we were quite busy," he smirked. The smile on his face spread wider as Julie shoved her hair forward over her cheeks, her neck. "Oh yes, we wouldn't want to keep your organs apart for too long now, would we?" Ada smirked as she dumped into the couch. Kai glared at her as she crossed one leg over the other. "Last warning," he grunted. He wrapped an arm around Julie's waist and led her to the confluence of couches. "So?" he demanded immediately they were comfortable seated. He pulled Julie aside, absolutely loving it when she leaned into him, despite the raging red on her cheeks as she did. "Yes, so. After our little debacle with your buddy Adrian," she began and reached for her bag to pull out some folders. "You'd do well to not address him as that, Ada," he warned, a glare pointed at Ada as he watched the other wolf pull out some brown folders. Ada rolled her eyes. "Sure thing. Now can I go on?" she asked, but her eyes looked like regardless of his answer, she would either way. Kai nodded. "Not like I can stop you either way, but sure," he replied. Ada smirked because she knew he was right. She didn't take orders from him, and she was just as much of an alpha as he was. The only difference was she had to be married to attain her position. "So after a little research on my path, I found he didn't work alone." She scrolled through the files. What piqued my interest the most was the basket he had used. Those cannot be made by regular weavers, so it got me thinking, could it be possible he worked with someone else that wasn't there? Wasn't really actively involved in the entire thing, but rather pulled strings sim the background. Ada waited like she actually expected them to answer. Julie opened her mouth to answer, say something, but Kai rubbed a finger down her arm and she was stunned shut. "It's likely, but wouldn't be as easy. What kind of help were you thinking?" Kai asked. "I'm glad you asked, since it wasn't the Weavers. I wonder what clan or wrath, what species he could possibly ask for help." Ada said slowly to further emphasize her theory. Did she mean that he not only worked with his kind, werewolves, but another species as well? "What species do you have in mind? Or better yet, what did you discover?" Julie asked. Her fingers tapped against her thighs as she thought of what other possible species there could be that would not only offer assistance to Adrian, but actually form an alliance with him. And worse, an alliance again, not one but two alphas. Well, technically Ada wasn't an alpha yet, but she was an alpha's daughter, so she might as well be an alpha. "Yeah, do you have in mind? Because I don't see anyone being dumb enough to not only help the idiot, but actually form an alliance with him." "Exactly my thoughts. It didn't add up. It made not sense, right?" She reached into one of the folders and pulled out two slim sheets of paper. She handed one to Julie and the other to Kai, having to lean and stretch forward a little, but she eventually succeeded in handing it to him. She blew a breath as she leaned back against her seat. Kai inspected the pictures in questions. He'd expected a picture of someone, the accomplice, the dumb rat stupid enough to believe in a cause involving Adrian. But to his surprise, he was staring as an image of different writings in another language. Writing used by witches. Kai's surprise is audible in his voice. "Exactly. I suspect he conspired with witches to pull whatever it was he also succeeded in pulling, she said. Kai mused. That would explain a few things. He agreed. Ada nodded in agreement. She grabbed the folders. Want to hold on to that? She gestured towards the two copies in his and Julie's hands. Yeah, I think I just might. Kai tilted his head in her direction. All right then, Ada said, getting to her feet. That's all I could get for now. When I have more, would let you know, she assured. Would be expecting word soon. Kai leaned back on the couch. Thank you, he added with a smile. The surprise crossed through Ada's face before she could stop it. Did she just hear correctly, or was she imagining it? Kai actually appreciated her efforts. And ever more shocking, he smiled. An actual smile? She looked at Julie and smiled. She was a good influence on him. What's that smirk for? Julie asked immediately. She caught her gaze. Oh, nothing, Ada said, smiling cheekily. Julie eyed her suspiciously and waited for her to cave. She shrugged after a few seconds. All right, see you lovebirds later, Ada called behind her as she headed for the door. The store slammed behind her and the room fell silent. I want you to accompany me somewhere, Kai blurted, breaking the silence. Are you asking or telling? She turned to him, holding back a smile. Which would make you agree? He arched a brow, looking so damn cute. Take a wild guess. She turned her body fully to face him. Her arm covered his on the head of the couch. Asking? He watched her apprehensively, his tone unsure. Julie couldn't hold it any longer. She burst out in laughter as she watched him look so scared over something so simple, something he would normally have made her do with or without her permission. She smiled as she said, Sure, where are we going? His lips stretched in a childish grin. You'll find out when we get there, he teased. Julie glared at him. Tell me? She whined and pinched his shoulder when he still wouldn't say anything. Just be patient. You'll see in due time. Kai chuckled, rising off the couch. Julie crossed her arms over her chest and huffed. I hate you, she grunted. You wish you did, he retorted easily. He stretched out an arm and waited. Her eyes narrowed into slits, but she walked into his arms still. She let him guide them into the room and immediately ran from his embrace the moment they crossed the doorway to the bedroom. Getting dressed took way more time than it usually would, thanks to Kai, who wouldn't stop ripping her items of clothing every 2 seconds just to place a kiss on the exposed skin. Julie, any time today would be perfect, Kai yelled out an hour later. Coming, Julie called back from inside the house. You would be. Just wait for when we get back. He smirked, even though she couldn't see him. He could just picture her cute attempt at a glare from a distance. Sure enough, when she emerged from within the house, she was glaring at him. He pulled the door open and she slipped into the car easily, her ponytail whipped behind her. Kai tucked it safely in before he shut the door. He ran across to the other side, got in, and sped down the driveway and through the gate. Want some music? Since when do you drive with music? Kai glared at her. No music then, fine. He grunted. Julie laughed. I didn't mean to burst your bubble, it's just really strange. You've never driven with music before. Do you always drive with me? He arched a brow at her. To be honest, he did have a point, but there was no way she was letting her first win go. I do 80% of the time, and you've never even suggested not to talk of play any form of music, she countered. Kai groaned in frustration. I should have shut my damn mouth. He muttered to himself. What was that? Julie teased. Shut it. Kai forced through gritted teeth. Julie burst out laughing. Oh, come on, I was just playing. She shoved his shoulder lightly with hers. Hey, I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to get in an accident. Kai gripped the steering tighter, pinning her with a glare every 2 seconds, only to look back at the road the next. Julie rolled her eyes. Just play something pop rock. Kai raised a brow, a bewildered look on his face. You'd have to kill me first. He deadpanned. Don't discriminate. Julie chuckled. It's not discriminating, it's called having taste. He snorted. You did not just, she grumbled. I did, and you should take the advice. He threw over his shoulders. Julie snorted a reply and began shuffling between channels. Kai looked back at her and smiled without saying a word. He rolled the car into the parking lot and smirked as he shut off the engine just as she found the perfect song. Open the door, she grumbled. Kai leaned back relaxed despite her glare. Wait, I'd get it. He winked just before he got out of the car. He jogged to the other side of the car. A beep rang in the air before he pulled it open. Asshole! But would an asshole open the door for you? Her whiny conscience whispered. I can open my own damn doors, she snorted back, avoiding his eyes when they snapped at the sound. She stepped down and is immediately surprised to see where he had brought her. She wouldn't lie, she had expected a high-end fashion store, a five-star restaurant, or even a famous jewelry store, or more absurd and expensive car dealer. What she hasn't expected was a baby and maternity store. She followed closely behind him, still confused as to why he had brought her there. She wasn't stupid. She didn't forget she had 3 times the size of her normal stomach on her and a possible werewolf baby growing in her. But it was more of the why he was doing it that was the confusing part. If you keep maintaining a 5-pace distance from me, people might start to think I kidnapped you. Kai grunted, the annoyance in his voice surprising, his glare intense. Julie quickened her steps to meet up with him. A smile crept on her face as she noticed how he slowed down his footsteps to let her catch up. She closed the distance, and he reached for her hand immediately she was by his side, which was even more surprising. She shrugged it off and smiled a big, bright smile as she took his hand. The glass doors part by themselves to reveal a store filled with all manner of baby essentials, from clothing to food to shampoo, conditioners, and care products. It was all in sections, and each section had a big placard with the section's contents, which made it easy to see where to go from the entrance based on need. Kai guided her towards the care item sections first, grabbing a shopping cart as they crossed the row of carts at the section just before the care item section. He picked up an expensive-looking baby oil, the wrap blue and shaped like an orange. Just when she thought he was going to ask her for help, he flipped the bottle to the other side, the side with the list of ingredients, and squinted his eyes as he inspected it. Nope. Fragrance is never good for adult skin. I'm sure a baby should run from it. He shared his thoughts as he placed the bottle back only to pick another and do the same thing. He went through about 3 bottles before he finally decided on one and tossed it into the shopping cart. He pushed the cart to the next section, his other hand still laced with Julie's. He picked up a lotion bottle, his brows scrunched up almost instantly. Hey, I would like to confirm something. He called to a brunette who wore a white blouse and some gray pants. The store badge sat neatly where her breast pocket was supposed to be, her name boldly written on it. Her eyes widened in surprise, fear. Whatever it was, she approached cautiously like he was an animal waiting for his prey to draw closer. What would you like to know? Her hands are folded tightly behind her. This lotion, it doesn't specify if it's for just the body or just the face, he mused. Can it be used for both? Because I'd like to be sure, he asked. To say she was shocked would be an understatement. Her jaw dropped as she watched Kai interact with the staff like a regular responsible father would, and not a multimillionaire nor an alpha. She could get used to it. She followed closely behind him as they went from aisle to aisle, her unable to keep the smile off her face, and Kai meticulously and carefully examined each item before he added it to the cart. His frequent need to ask the staff questions, not in the least but as annoying as she thought it would be. He looked so focused on making the right choice, almost like he wasn't selecting banny items and was in fact on a hunt for precious works of art. She steered clear of his path, just pleased to see him so at peace and so excited with something so tender, gentle. It was a nice sight to say the least. Her smile dropped as she thought back to how it had been at the pack house, how he had been at the pack house. He had been distant and domineering, the 2 characteristics she was most scared of. Fine, he showed her he had a tender side, a delicate side that loved to pick items, clothing, food, and all for an unborn child that wasn't even his as far as he knew. But he also had that side. He still did. It was still basically him. She couldn't help the warmth that crawled its way to her heart every time he would call a staff to ask more questions, when she remembered how attentive and patient he was being towards everything. It was baby clothes. It was a welcome change from her experiences with men from the human society, They rarely participated actively in stocking up on baby items before the baby is actually born. They would most times either be busy with work or something except the baby shopping. But as she watched Kai, she could see finally the emphasis werewolves placed on family. It exceeded that of humans by a mile and then some. A sense of security overwhelmed her. If he continued, she would feel like she actually belonged there, with him and his family. The ride home was a quiet one, but it wasn't the awkward kind of silence. It was more the peaceful kind, like there was a mutual agreement type of silence. He rolled the car into his driveway and began pulling out item after item. Somehow he had known exactly what to get, like he was ticking a list off the top of his head. He pulled out the trolley first, then the baby scooter next, then diapers, wipes, lotion, oil, powders, shower gels of different sorts, and a cute blue and pink towel. Julie stretched her hand to grab some of the items, and Kai immediately swatted it away. "Don't stress yourself, I can handle it," he grunted. His tone was harsh, but his statement caused a smile to stretch across her face. She watched him life everything in one go like it were mere paper and not a pile of baby items. She hurried to at least help with the door, but his foot kicked the door before she could even do much as suggested. She rolled her eyes and waited while he squeezed through the door. He hurled the items through the living room and into their shared bedroom. She dumped into the couch. He wouldn't let her help either way, so there was no point following behind him. She watched as he struggled once in a while and have to shift hands, but still he did it all without demanding her help. Warmth spread through her as he balanced them in his arms like delicate items. Ugh! Why did he have to suddenly become so sweet? Now it was going to be cruel of her to even consider leaving. But she had to, for her safety and the baby's. Was it really for her safety, though? The man did save her from her psycho ex and made sure the baby had everything he or she needed for when they do decide to join the earth. She released a shaky breath. A dull ache bothered her mind. She had only two choices, and neither seemed exactly fair to both of them. She could stick with her original plan and run away with the child the moment it is born, but that would mean she would have to leave Kai all alone, after raising his hopes, after making him believe he had an heir, after letting him announce to his wolf pack and his parents that he had an heir on the way, and even worse, after he had surprisingly accepted to take care of a child that, as far as he knew, was in no way related to him. On the other end, she could just let go of her initial plans to run away and stay. It could be good for the baby. Kai seemed rather accepting and ready to be the responsible father, and what could possibly make her happier than to see her child being cared for properly? He had been so caring when he had woken up to her on the bed. His eyes had actually softened. There was no faking that. She groaned as more memories of Kai's acts of kindness and his little ways of expressing his love for her flooded her mind. Why now? Everything was going so well. Her choice and decision had been set in stone, and now, all of a sudden, it all felt so wrong. Imagining life without him felt like it would be a literal hell. What to do? What to do? Her head snapped in the direction of the bedroom as the sound of something hitting a wall from the room. She rushed to see what had happened, and her heart almost leapt into her throat at the sight of Kai on the ground covered by shattered wood. How did... She began to ask, but decided her questions could come later and rushed to his side instead. "I thought there would be no need for that since we've already been to the wolf pack?" Julie arched a brow at him in confusion. "I mean, it was just a union between two people. Fine, he was an alpha, the alpha of one of the strongest, if not the strongest wolf pack, but still, that had been the reason they had gone to the wolf pack in the first place. We have to." Kai breath. His legs lazily crossed over the other as he pulled her deeper into his embrace. "It would paint the wrong picture if we pay respect to the werewolf society and not the human society. Most of the leaders are already getting antsy as it is. We can't possibly add fuel to the flame." He ran a hand lazily through her hair as he explained. Well, it did make sense. She'd definitely think about it if she had to ensure werewolves didn't plan to use their natural abilities against her people. "Oh, okay then, when?" "We have to start getting ready now." He groaned like he was being forced to. It felt good knowing he wanted to spend more time with her. I want us to make a quick stop before we meet with the human reps. He assisted her to her feet. She stumbled into his chest, and he held her still with his free arm. She sighed in relief as she got her footing. They got into the bedroom, and he led her to the bathroom. She chuckled with each push of his hand against her back. "Why do I feel like I'm being pure into a trap?" She teased. "Don't worry, it's a trap you'd enjoy." His deep rumble sent shivers from where his breath fanned her ears, down her shoulders and to a place she refused to focus on. "We'd be late," she reminded. The groan was immediate. "I really hate being so damn important sometimes." Julie rolled her eyes. "Now you're cocky too, great combo." She laughed as her feet dipped into the bathtub. Kai grumpily took a quick shower, fighting furiously the urge to help her ensure she was clean. He stepped out of the bathtub and wrapped a towel around his waist. He picked up a second towel, just as the sound of the shower being turned off caught his ears. Julie smiled as she took the towel he offered her and wrapped it around herself. He let her step out of the bathroom first and shut the door behind him. They got dressed in record time, no teasing or communication. She clasped a pearl necklace around her neck. The cute little pendant glistened against the sun streaming through the windows. The jewelry fell back down her chest almost immediately. "You know I would gladly help with that," he whispered against her ears, his arms wrapped snugly around her waist. "We would get nowhere if I do that," she chuckled. Kai gasped like he'd been struck. "How dare you think that? I would never." Julie rolled her eyes. "Who knew you could try to be funny?" she teased. "I don't try to be darling, I already am." He placed a peck on her cheeks, clasped the necklace easily around her neck, and stepped out of the room. "I'd be waiting in the car," he called behind him. Julie turned her face left, then right, and left again to make sure she looked her best. She didn't know where they were headed, but with how giddy he'd been ever since he mentioned it, she had a feeling it was something important. And for Kai, important most times than not means sophisticated places. Add that to the fact that they'd be going for the meeting right after, and suddenly she didn't feel overdressed. She ran her hands down the long black dress. The top bodice hugged her in all the right places, forked her shoulders to her waist, and tightened a little more, just before it gave way to a long flare skirt that extended from her waist down to her ankle. She felt sexy, despite her protruding belly. That feeling was back again. As she watched Kai bid his farewell to the couple, her resolve lost yet another thread. He had sounded too sincere and determined when he had explained how he intended to unite both societies eventually, seal the bridge so neatly it would almost be like the gap was never there to begin with. He wrapped an arm around her waist as he guided her to the entrance. "It was great meeting you," she called behind her. Their waves back were the last thing Julie saw before the door was slammed shut behind her. "I see you like them," Kai openly observed. Julie chuckled. "It's impossible not to." She smiled fondly as she remembered how welcoming they had been. Despite her being a human, her werewolf mate hadn't been dismissive of her. If anything, he showed respect, and her heart warmed because she knew it had nothing to do with Kai or his presence this time. She slipped into the car just as Kai shut the car door on the driver's side. She grinned mischievously as she poked at the protruding red button. The sound of pop music blared from the speakers. Kai's glare shifted to her almost immediately, and she burst out laughing. "Oh my!" She coughed between laughs. "Oh my God, you should see your face." Water streamed from the crinkling at the extreme side of her eyes as she sputtered incoherent words between laughs. Kai's eyes softened, his shoulders relaxed as a smile slipped on his face. God, she was beautiful. He shook his head as if shaking the very thought away. He forced a frown back on his face as he grunted, "What's so funny?" "You. I really wished you could see your face." She let out a breath, her laughing fit reaching its finish line. She leaned back on the seat. "You looked like I just killed your favorite puppy and made dinner out of it." She chuckled and wiped tears from the sides of her eyes. "What you did is definitely worse. I mean, why does she sound like she's being choked and waterboarded at the same time?" He swept a hand towards the car stereo. Julie laughed even harder. "Stop, no!" She held her throat. "That's an icon you're speaking of," she reprimanded. A pop icon. Thank you for specifying. Now I know what genre to avoid. His lips stretched in a sugar-sweet smile. Julie rolled her eyes. Where are you taking me anyways? Should have known you weren't listening. He rolled his eyes. I was, just not actively. She grinned. We're going to Facade Park. It's basically a neutral area where humans and werewolves can meet without like a formal gathering and all of that. Why bother with it then if you can just have formal gatherings? Some werewolves do not take too lightly to humans being in their territory. It was one of the conditions laid down for the treaty to be signed. They don't overstep, and a werewolf won't rip their throats out. He grimaced as the words left his lips. Sorry, I forget humans hate specific graphics like that. Yeah, I could get the message without it. She happily agreed. The car slowed to a stop just before the park entrance. Kai turned to her. Sure you're ready? As I'd ever be. She blew a breath. They stepped out and Kai immediately reached for her hand. She laced her hand with his as they headed to the spot where the human representatives were waiting for them. The representatives sat close together in clumps. The human representatives sat to the right of an aging willow tree, while the werewolf representatives sat on the left. Julie held back a smile at the realization that somewhere in her mind she had somehow categorized each society into a certain build. Werewolves were more likely to be on the toned side because, aside genetics, they tend to be involved in inter-pack fights and all. Humans, on the other hand, did mostly lazing about, or if they did work, most times worked in offices, something sedentary that didn't require much muscle power to begin with. As her eyes scanned the faces from one human representative to the other, she knew she wasn't too far off. Some were toned, and if they weren't clumped together with other human representatives, she would have easily mistaken them for one of the werewolf representatives. But others looked like all their years of chugging down beer had finally caught up with them. Kai rubbed soothing circles on the dorsum of her hand as they walked between both lines of representatives and took the seats at the head of the makeshift dining table arrangement. Okay, can we begin? They all nodded in agreement, just as some hummed. So some of the reports reaching us hasn't exactly been favorable lately. The mayor began, his voice surprisingly audible despite the depth of it. What reports? A man with a balding front line asked almost immediately, sounding a little defensive considering what the mayor had said. Maybe he knew someone involved in said reports, or he was a reason for said reports. Julie couldn't decide, so she kept her mouth shut and kept her hands less than a finger width close to Kai's. Reports about attacks on humans by the werewolves, reports of forced matings, of territory overstep. Need I go on? The man across from him listed out. From the tone of his voice, it didn't take a genius to tell that he was far from happy with said reports. There would be no need for that, Michael. The mayor lifted a hand as if to halt what next he had to say. As I was saying, it doesn't seem like we've been taken seriously by your people, especially since we both signed a treaty. I thought that would be enough, respected enough to garner some form of order between both our societies, but it's starting to look like I was wrong to even consider the order. The mayor continued. His eyes snapped from Kai to the other werewolf representatives and back to Kai. Kai's hand reached for hers in the little gap that separated them. He laced their fingers and squeezed gently. It wasn't loud enough for everyone present to hear, but Julie was close enough to hear the sound of a heavy breath escaping his lips. I'm appalled to hear of these events. Really, I am. The sincerity in his voice had the mayor leaning back on his chair. We all know the treaty wasn't something we signed on a whim, so it wouldn't be so easy to disregard it. But the actions and reports suggests otherwise. A man with a clockwork moustache cut in. Michael, who sat beside him, nodded in agreement. Exactly. We speak so highly of the treaty, agree to the face that it's binding, but somehow miss the law attached to said treaty, laws that were thought of and drawn up by the very people in this meeting. So I'm sorry if I find it hard to believe that it wasn't intentional, probably a way to prove something you never let us forget as it is. Which is? A tall, lanky-looking man with blue eyes so light it was just 2 shades away from white. That you guys have him edged should things go south. You're the strong ones. You've lived years longer than most of us. You're the superior being. Don't forget the fact that they can snap our necks with just 2 fingers if they feel bored enough to give us the honor. Another man, on the short side with a belly like a disco ball, rolled his eyes as he spat the words. The stout man immediately shuts up, but Kai's glare doesn't soften. As I was saying, he dragged, the anger still laced neatly in his voice, I think the human society has to make a few concessions. His eyes ran through the circle of representatives, gauging each of their reactions. None looked the least bit agreeable, a few looked curious, but others most looked furious. Some tried to control their reactions, but a certain man, a younger version of the potbelly man, looked right on the edge of a flip-out. I believe we've made enough compromise for one treaty. He gritted out, his hands fisted by his side. Kai fought the urge to roll his eyes at his wasted effort of an angry fit. Raphael knew better than to cross the line with him. They all did. By concessions, I mean you have to think outside the obvious. Just like in every society involving more than 5 persons, the human society included, there would always be deviants that feel they are a voice, rules, and control of a particular body. The werewolf community is no exception. He explained, his gaze focused on the mayor. If he was being honest, he didn't give a shit what the rest of the representatives thought. No matter their disagreements and grievances, they eventually all answered to the mayor, and if any final decisions were to be made, he made them. The mayor nodded his head slightly in agreement. Kai leaned back calmly, like a dozen eyes weren't on him as he spoke. Julie wasn't even the one talking, nor the center of attention, yet she had to keep a firm grip on her seat to keep from quaking in her boots. The rogues are getting out of control, I'd agree, and while we're working on getting them back in control, whether it is acknowledged or not. He paused, his gaze shifted to Raphael. The man in question shrunk back, his anger long discarded. It is still our top priority, and the concession I need you all to make is agree to be patient with our society, pacify your subjects, and just trust that we have your best interest at hand, because your growth and peace equals ours as well, and we would not want to do anything to jeopardize that. He promised. Julie watched him address men that she would consider older than him, way older than him if he were human, without looking out of place or out of control. She knew, deep down, that he didn't even need their support to do as he pleased, but still he went further to convince them, to make them understand, instead of shoving it down their throat and taking away their choice. How important was this treaty to him anyways? As far as she could see, he could do without it. He didn't need it. But the way he explained to them sounded like he was fighting to make sure it stayed in place. It was amazing to see. Rare and endearing to watch him speak with so much authority and cal, yet somehow the respect he held for the representatives still showed. He didn't sound like he was just trying to pacify the masses. He sounded honest and bothered, like he felt the discrepancies and misunderstanding of both cultures, and wasn't picking a side, but was merely holding a neutral zone, acting as the middleman between both societies.